Uh, 405, 406.
I heard Edelweiss echo through where I have the Twitch open.
Echo, echo, echo.
Yeah, and I just heard myself.
Oh,
Okay. It's working.
Is that better? I don't know if that's better, but because like I think it's the same thing that happened when we started streaming yesterday. Well, we had all kinds of issues when we started streaming yesterday.
Oh no.
Yeah, like it was.
I had some issues too, and I was embarrassed.
Oh well, I tried to log in and I was pasting your ramp druid in, and all of a sudden, like none of the new cards were available. Which kind of makes it hard to have decks with new cards. So I panicked, messaged Hat, like, what do I do? He's like, try logging out, logging back in. I did. It didn't do anything. And then he logged in as me, and then it was fine. And then I logged back in, and it was okay. But I'd already like started the stream because like I had already set up everything in advance.
That's frustrating.
Yeah. So then I'd like stop the stream and start it again. But you know, it worked out in the end. So yeah, so hi everybody. Hopefully you can hear us all now. So
hello.
Oh, I should open an Audacity too. That's another thing I should do. Nope, I am not installing an update. That is not a thing I'm doing right now because updates are what got us into this trouble in the first place.
True, updates are bad.
Yeah, no, you should. As an IT person, you should never update anything ever. Yeah, no, that's not true. But we're not recording yet, so I can say that.
How many pints does this interview? I don't know, but I had too much caffeine yesterday.
Oh. I built my morning routine around a seasonal drink at Dunkin', which they then discontinued 2 days ago.
Oh no.
So I've had to start drinking decaf coffee again, which is not the worst thing in the world, but I don't trust it because I'm afraid it's going to have actual caffeine in it.
Well, I only bought 2 cans of mate earlier in the week, and I used them both yesterday.
I mean,
so
I would figure Lorinda's sparkling personality would just keep you awake and energized, but
you know, maybe if I weren't crashing hella hard.
I mean, they were also like, you know, in like it must have been like ass o'clock their time too. I guess that doesn't matter based on their schedule, but you know.
I mean, yeah, Lorinda did great. No, that was fine. But then I accidentally stayed up for another like 3 hours afterwards or whatever, and then
don't do
was
that.
like, oh yeah, I had to move furniture at 8:30 in the morning.
All right.
Doing
well,
great.
should we start? Oh, thank you for the sub, JDP Range. Appreciate it. We could do that.
It occurs to me that I'm going to do the intro and then be like silent for half an hour.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably fine. Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to remember how we did it when Hat ran it, and I think that's what we did.
Too.
I think we just like let the track run for silence for half an hour.
Well,
or did we do like a part?
I mean, if Hat was the only one that was speaking, I guess I don't know if Hat was like record intro, stop recording, and then started recording again, or if he just.
I honestly don't remember because it was so long ago.
Neither do I.
I think it's probably safer to just let the thing run.
You'd think I would remember because I would have the audio files.
Right, yeah. Well, you're also sleep deprived, so, you know.
Yeah, but everything is going to be easier whether we could also count back in after, if that's easier. I don't know.
It's fine.
No, I think we just leave it running and then it's fine. It's probably better that way.
because we've got to have your right. It's not just me. You guys say hello. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's, you know, if we got dev interviews so often that we remembered how to do it from time to time, that would be great. But it's not how these things work.
I mean, they're not really on offer that frequently, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I am recording.
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 Okay. So, okay. We all set?
Yep.
All right. 3, 2, 1, clap. 3, 2, 1, clap. All right. Starting the show in 5, 4, 3, 2.
I grant you permission to speak. Shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you. Never lose hope.
Here, Fred Shadows.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, Fred.
Hello and welcome to episode 406 of Coin Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, July 27th, 2023 in the evening. Coming to you from Obregon, Ohio, it's me, Edelweiss. And from Northrend, Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
And joining us from Teldersill, California, we have Magesa.
Oh.
And then we have a special treat for everyone today. We, like a few of the other shows out there, managed to snag ourselves a dev interview. So we are going to start off the show with that interview, and then it will cut back to the three of us. So yeah, it was a blast. We got to speak with Cora and Gallon, and Wicked's gonna send that up now. Welcome, everyone. We have something very exciting for you. We have been blessed to have an interview with Edward Gallon from The Final Design and Cora Giorgio for Songbird Cora from, are you initial now or are you just a design lead? How does that work?
I'm the initial design lead. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Great.
we co-opted Edward quite some time back onto initial design as well, but he's good at everything. So you can't really put labels on him.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Hello. I'm Edward. My last name is not actually Gallon. That's just my tag. But you can call me either. Both are fine. I think I'm
You
kind
should
of
got your first name right.
Yes, that's true.
A lot of
But
people
yeah.
don't.
Oh, there's a story. Okay. This is not. Well, I guess we can share it. I think half the people that I meet call me Edwin, and it's like to the point where I have a collage that at some point, if I'm ever going to do like an introduction of myself, and we're like, okay, this is my name. This is not my name. This is Edwin Van Cleef, Dread Pirate of the Four Seas and Slayer of Stormwind. I could get into a little bit, but besides the point, I was an initial designer on Titans. Okay, cool.
Awesome. Well, so we have two initial designers joining us to talk about all manner of things Titans. And yeah, Magesa, our lovely new host. Why don't we dive right in? Magesa, you've got the first question.
So thank you so much for joining us. And so I wanted to start with Titans, as they are kind of the marquee part of the expansion. So the Titan keyword is a very new design for Hearthstone. It's almost like a new card type, but of course they are still minions. Cora, you said in your podcast interview on Doctor 3 recently, which everybody should go listen to, that minions with activatable effects were something that had been explored as far back as the Barons expansion, but never quite worked out until now. So we were wondering, did the design of locations after that influence the design of Titans, and in addition, what both of you see as the design space advantages and disadvantages of making Titans minions, and how you had to adapt to having a very different type of minion still be affected by everything that affects minions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll be honest and say I thought that locations were going to be sort of the ultimate form of what these original Titan explorations would culminate in. I thought we eventually realized, well, we probably just can't do this as a minion. There's too many problems. There's too many rules to do it as a minion. So we just need to make it a new card type. And that is sort of where locations came from. Was we had all of these rules we had to establish. We might as well just, go all out, do everything that we think will make it the best activatable ability on board card that we can. And that's where locations were born from. So when we revisited it only a year after we did locations, I thought, wow, are we just going to run into a lot of the same issues that we had the first time around? These are minions, but they're so big and they're so powerful that they've all got a target on their back. And if they are destroyed very quickly, then you don't actually feel like you get a lot of value out of them. So is it even worth having them have multiple abilities? There was just sort of, and they can't attack. There was a lot of rules around it. So yes, that was where locations came from, but it just so happened that, we came back to it with Titans. We explored some different options for how they could work. And we did find a version that was noticeably different from locations, that had a lot of improvements from, the original prototypes that we'd been working on for quite some time. And then with the introduction of 3 separate abilities, it felt like they had that very unique play style and their own visible identities. So that was really cool. I was very surprised, but I'm thrilled that it worked out so well.
Well, I wanted to slip in a bit of a silly question here. We've got some, background on the Titans, of course. I think most people know that Sargeras is a villain, but just to break up some of the serious questions with a silly one, if there were an anime about Titans, who would be the protagonist?
Oh, you could totally make a shonen out of X21 Repair Bot, a noble mini bot. Like, there's a plucky duo adventurers that get their start, and over time they get like extra magnetic minions, and then X21 Repair Bot with their dying breath gives the final power push to win the whole show. It would work. Trust me.
Way to pick the 2 most obscure characters in this set.
Yeah, out of all the Titans and everything, it's like
they're gonna say
Paladin
Golganath, they're gonna say Amethyst, X21 Repair Bot.
Yeah, and welcome back to season 38 of this shonen. It would never end. So
it just makes me think of all the droid episodes of Clone Wars. So interesting answer there.
I would absolutely watch that show, and I don't usually watch anime, but you've got me hooked. I wanted to look next at the other main keyword from the expansion, which is Forge. I was wondering what unique possibilities Forge opened up for you as designers, whether you maybe have an example of how you worked to make the Forge cards flexible enough so that the choice of whether or not to forge them was an interesting choice. And finally, on how you settled on a flat 2 mana cost for forging for all of the Forge cards.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of stuff that goes into this answer, and it's not just from the pure initial designer lens. I think there's some UI and UX considerations for this one as well. Forge's first form was actually Manathirst's first form. So Manathirst went through a design change pretty late in the final design process of March of the Lich King. What Manathirst used to do was it was a 2 mana effect that was always spent. The best way that I can describe it is kind of similar to the Forbidden Cycle, Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Words, where you might have a 5 mana card that if you had 7 mana unlocked, it would spend 2 extra mana to do an effect. And something that I like to think about when we make keyword design for Hearthstone, when we make new effects for Hearthstone, is they should be providing you something interesting, either in power, like additional power. So think combos in this space. The new Manathirst is in this space where over time it might get more powerful, or optionality. Dredge is a great example of that. And I think the new Forge is a great example of that, where you get the option to do it. You aren't forced into this decision. I think the old Manathirst wasn't a great example of either, because we still had to balance around the 5 and 7 mana version of a card. We couldn't just make the 7 mana version busted, because that's how players would always use it. And it led to a lot of really awkward decision making, where you just wanted the 5 mana effect, but you had to sequence your turn in a weird way where you couldn't really do it. So one of the benefits of where UI comes into this discussion is we finally got this working example of tradable. And what we found out was that, it was a little bit of a risk doing tradable. The dragging over your deck, we weren't quite sure how players would respond to it. But by the time that March of the Lich King was live, we got enough detail, or after March of the Lich King went live, we got enough detail about, hey, this is actually really easy to use and it's pretty simple to understand. Players, it's totally intuitive. And what we found was we could take that and use it as forge. We could take that, like if you wanted to spend the mana, this is a really easy way to do it. So UI helps a lot with making that decision. I think going to your point of why is it 2 mana across the board, I think a pretty important part of Hearthstone as well is just accessibility. You should be able to explain a mechanic in less than a paragraph for everyone to understand it. And I think having a mana cost that's even across the board helps for a few reasons. One of them is just the accessibility of, understanding the mechanic intuitively. One forge card kind of works like every other forge card, even though they have different effects. And then also from like kind of the tricksy mind games that you want to play with your opponent. I don't think this is going to come up as much. But let's say you have multiple forge cards in your deck. The fact that they all cost 2 mana is kind of like secrets. You're not sure quite which one they're forging yet. So I thought that was a pretty good, maybe smaller scale addition to the mechanic.
So talking about some of the class specific packages that we got in the set, some of the classes went in a pretty different direction than I think a lot of people were expecting. Like the mechs in Rogue, I know was something that kind of came out of left field, and Arcane Automaton is something that I don't think a lot of people would have predicted. So what made this the right time to take some of these classes in like this drastically different direction? And how hard is it to thread the needle between giving the classes different things to do, but also keeping fans of those classes happy that it feels like those classes?
Yeah, so when is the right time to introduce something new? I think every set that we make is the right time to be doing something new. I think one critical part of Hearthstone that we always want to avoid is Hearthstone should never feel like a paint by numbers set. You should never go into a Hearthstone set and be like, yep, here is archetype A that they've been doing 20 times in a row or anything like that. I think threading the needle is players always want repeats of stuff that we've done in the past. I think like mech decks or minion type style decks are a fan favorite. Control Warrior is another one that I think is coming back with a vengeance in Titans. But whenever we do that, I think it's important that we always add that new flair, that's something new that hasn't really been done before. I think it's incredibly important that when you sit down and play with something, even if it is, referencing something old, there's always that little bit of new or a lot of bit of new in the case of new archetypes. I had one example written down. Sorry. I think a good example of this is the spell school mage in Titans, right? One of the I would say the big part of where you're accessing those spell schools is the arcane fire and frost spells, right? Those are going to be the majority, the bulk of what you're doing. And I think that's pretty similar to stuff we've done in the past. I think United and Stormwind referenced something similar. Excuse me. But the twist of the new, you have Discovery of Magic that lets you tap into multiple different spell schools beyond what mage is normally capable of. I think that's one example of how we always try to spice it up.
Yeah, I think it's really important to expand on class identity as time goes on and to make sure that classes are always getting to experiment with new and interesting things. And it's really important to us that if we are expanding on that class identity, that it still feels like it's appropriate for the class, that it still feels like something that fits within sort of those parameters that we've developed. But we've found over the last 10 years that if you never expand the box that you're working within, that things can be a little bit samey. It's hard to reinvent the wheel a dozen times and make Control Warrior the same way every time, or make Secret Hunter the same way every time. Play patterns are just rather similar. So to be able to very conscientiously and very intentionally expand on what a class is capable of doing, and then to introduce that at a time that feels thematically appropriate, that feels appropriately powerful and exciting. I think that's when you really can sort of thread the needle and make something that feels really great and fun.
Yeah, so in kind of following up on these sort of newer and bigger designs, I feel like as the design of more and more impressive marquee cards has escalated, so too has a bit of the complexity of outside the client knowledge that accompanies them. The examples that come to mind are Colossals can't be evolved into, triple rune cards now can't be discovered, and Titans can't be generated by either of these means. So is there any consideration perhaps to adding transparency of these extra rules to the client somehow in the future, just as we have related cards visible in the client collection now after the new set comes out? And as designers, what goes into the decisions to make a change that is not visible in client?
Yeah, this is a big concern of mine. I think it's a big concern of everybody on the team, that when you're making more complex mechanics and more complex cards, being able to surface that information appropriately so players can parse through it and come to that understanding on their own is really important, because I think the majority of players just choose not to interact with things like Twitter content or, AMAs or videos that we make where we're explaining these things. And we do make an effort to do that, but it's not always easy to surface that information to our players. So they need to be able to figure these things out on their own. And that's where things like expanded collection abilities, or collection capabilities, tooltips, things like that are really important. And that's often where UI and effects and art really come in to sort of save our butts, because we're like, hey, we want to do this thing that's really complicated. Titans have 3 abilities and we can't give them 3 text boxes. How do we surface this information to our players? Mm-hmm. I think it's not always perfect, but it is very important to us that if we have these sort of rules that are very hidden, like things not being discoverable, things not being randomly generatable, that they, it's not ideal that we don't have a way to surface these things. We're always looking for better ways to do this. But it's important to us that they don't feel incredibly obtrusive. I think there's certainly going to be players who are like, oh, if I can just discover into my Titan here, I'm going to be golden. Or if I can just generate my Colossal, I'm going to be great. And they're not going to do that. And that's going to suck. That's not going to feel good. But I think most of the time, if you're just playing a game, maybe you won't even notice. And maybe that makes it so it's a little bit more acceptable. But I don't want to get it twisted. It's still not ideal in any case. So it's something that we're always looking to improve upon. And these hidden rules are just things that we really don't like to implement if we don't have to.
Yeah, I think following up on that, we are having discussions about like how are we going to show this off, but we don't really have a concrete answer of what we're going to do. So I'm going to give the Blizzard classic response of soon TM on what's going to happen there, but we are talking about it.
Something for the UI team.
So coming back to something that you can talk about, and it sounds, Cora, like you wanted to talk about on the Dr. 3 interview, but the cards hadn't been revealed yet, is Control Warrior, which has been pretty, since the Sunken City nerfs, has been kind of almost there, but not quite. And it definitely looks like, from what we're getting, like especially with Odin providing an actual win condition for the deck, that this is something that feels like it's going to be able to get there this time. So can you talk about what's been the challenge with getting Control Warrior to get back to where some people certainly would like it to be, and what are you really looking forward to with this new version of the deck?
Yeah, so I think that the big challenge here wasn't necessarily what cards to make. I think if we're sitting down and we're saying, hey, we want to make a really viable Control Warrior archetype, there's a certain number of goalposts that we have to hit. You need removal pieces, you need proactive development, you need sustain, so armor cards, things like that in this case. And in 2023 Hearthstone, you need some way to win the game. Usually that's some form of inevitability. Maybe it's just an overwhelming amount of stuff. It can be a lot of different things. So in this case, it wasn't necessarily an issue of, what to do. It was an issue of timing, I think, because we had sort of committed to, with Castle Nathria, this more mid-rangey, leaning aggressive at times, sort of enrage style of warrior. And then 25 had the fire package, which was also quite mid-rangey. And then March of the Lich King had the fire package, excuse me. And then Festival of Legends was sort of Rifts. And, that was very mid-rangey as well. And by the time that I think March of the Lich King was coming out, certainly by the time Festival of Legends was coming out, players were really saying, hey, we want a Control Warrior archetype. We've had Enrage, we've had mid-range now for a couple of sets. We want to do something different. We want to do something slower. And so in hindsight, I think we probably should have shot for something along those lines with Festival of Legends. I think Titans was a little bit late. But by the time players had been asking for these things, they were already pretty far in development in Titans. So we knew we wanted to do it. We had all these pieces. Odin was the same design that it is now, 5 months ago when players were asking for these things. So at this time, we're like, hey, we don't want to reinforce existing control pieces to try to make a control deck where there really isn't one, especially since we know we're really hitting control very hard with Titans. So what do? We just kind of let it ride, unfortunately. It doesn't always sound great for us to say, hey, things are coming, even though like we know they're coming. They're done at this point. They just need to ship. So yeah, it was just kind of uncomfortable timing with this case. But I'm very hopeful that the card set for Titans will make up for it. I think Odin is a really fantastic case for an inevitable win condition, but it feels very appropriate in the context of what the deck is trying to do, which is, survive, outlast their opponent, and then transition that, overwhelming amount of sustain into an aggressive game plan very late in the game. Which, Control Warrior back in 2014, 2015 looked a lot different. You would just sort of play all of your legendary minions and eventually you would kill your opponent. Now you need a little bit more to get there. But hopefully players will still enjoy the gameplay of it. And yeah, I think it should be fun.
Thanks. Yeah. That all makes a lot of sense. I mean, I was an Enrage Warrior person, but I also have a lot of sympathy for Control Warrior fans. And I'm really excited for this new deck. Moving on, besides just Warrior, I was wondering which cards and packages the two of you are most excited to see the players get their hands on, and if there's anything that you're planning to keep an especially close eye on, power level wise or plays wise, but mainly just, what are you really excited?
I think I'm excited and also a little eyebrow raised for the Nature Shaman package.
Players experiment with.
She roboting? Okay, we're good. Yeah, I'm both excited and a little eyebrow raised for the Nature Shaman package. I think the combination of Flash of Lightning and Crash of Thunder is really exciting, really spicy, being able to obviously discount all of your nature spells on the next turn with Lightning Reflexes is really potentially very powerful. But we went through some redesigns for those two cards, specifically keeping Bioluminescence in mind. Some early versions of that package of two cards were potentially a little bit too strong with Bioluminescence. So I'm still interested to see, can players make it work? How powerful is it really? And I hope that we threaded the needle correct there, but I do think it's really exciting.
I think on my side, I'm going to give the generic answer that gives you nothing about the set, but it is true. For me, I think it's the Titans. I'm really excited to see what players do with them. I think they are quite strong. They're coming in hot, but there's also a lot of counterplay. So I'm interested to see how that whole situation develops. I think they're a lot of fun as well. So, yeah.
Well, as a sort of follow-up here, so sometimes we do hear about cards getting balanced late in the design process, and other times it feels as though there are like maybe clear outliers that sort of even just from seeing them during reveals. I know we're wrong about this sometimes, but a lot of times, people do catch stuff and it's like, oh wow, this is clearly going to be very powerful. So what goes into final design's decisions on whether to release something they suspect may need to be rebalanced versus taking action before the cards get into the hands of players?
Yeah, it's all about maximizing fun. I think that is our primary goal whenever we're making new content. The numbers are important. We don't want any deck to be 70 or 60, even 60, maybe even 55% win rate for too long. But again, fun kind of trumps everything else when it comes to these decisions. I think a good example of this, and Cora is actually someone that we had a lot of talks back and forth, was Renethal. I think before Renethal went live, I said, Cora, there ain't no way. 40 and 40, there ain't no way. 30. I was pretty dead set on 35 and 40 beforehand. However, we shipped it at 40 and 40 because it was quite a bit more fun for the first few months it was out. And I think once we realized that, maybe players had their fill, maybe it was creeping up to like too much of the metagame, we toned it back. I think Renethal is still in a pretty healthy spot. But there are definitely cards where we think maximizing fun over the course of their lifetime might be shipping them slightly stronger than we intend, with the intention of, if this does end up being a problem, we can always nerf it later. And I think Renathal is a good example of that, right? Even though we kind of knew beforehand that Renathal might be a little bit too strong and we might end up nerfing him later on in the line, I think the overall amount of fun that was had with Renathal was higher because we shipped it at 40 and 40.
Never seen players matter about a balance change. Well, both happier and matter is very, very interesting. I don't know that we'll ever have another one quite like it.
I hadn't thought about that example just because I think it was a bit contentious among people after the reveal whether it was going to be strong enough or not. But I think that is sort of the perfect case study of maximizing fun.
So, are there any other stories of the development of this set that you've been dying to talk about now that all of the cards are out, that you can share with us? Obviously nothing that's going to give away too much, but if there's any funny stories or anything cool that you wouldn't get to tell people about otherwise.
Okay, so I tried to crowdsource for this question. So we were in a play test when I was going through and looking at the questions. So I asked some people who worked on it, and they were all like, that was a really long time ago. So they were useless to me. Then I asked the set lead, Alex Smith. And there's certain things that we don't want to get into like super detail about. Like we tried a lot of iterations of Titans. At one point, I think pretty early on, we keyed into, well, if they have multiple different abilities, that's pretty fun. We started with versions that had abilities that you could only use after they'd been on board for so many turns. So I think there was like one that was unlocked the first turn you played it, then won the second turn, then won the third turn. And that was really exciting. There was a lot of interesting design space there, but ran into some of the issues of it just felt like you so rarely got to interact with these abilities that, it wasn't terribly fun. It didn't feel like you had a lot of decisions to make. And I think that sort of vibe ended up translating into Norganon's passive a little bit, which is, you have optionality. You can use any of these abilities the first turn, second turn, third turn. But, maybe you only get to use the 20 damage ability very infrequently, or, increase your opponent's cards. So that was kind of fun. And he also reminded me of the design process for Amatis. Not necessarily Amatis as a, Amatis's functionality, but just that we spent quite a while looking for paladin characters that would fit, and didn't have anything that we really loved. And so we, got together and brainstormed on what would like a Titan that was a peacekeeper look like. And so we always have a phase of development where we do a style guide concepting process with our in-house artists. And so we sent over this prompt of, this is a peacekeeping Titan who keeps the peace between the other Titans in the Pantheon, to our artist Des. And she came back with the concepts for Amatis, which were just incredible. And we ended up using those concepts. I believe Zoltan Boros is the artist for her piece. Just blew us away, how beautiful that one came back. So that was definitely one that I think we remember as being a very cool moment.
I've got one behind the scenes. I've got a bone to pick a little bit. Not with Cora. It sounded like that. That's not the intent. But when Alex and I were recording the video for the Titans cinematic, I think at one point we talked about how we're bringing Resurrect back to Paladin for the first time. That was the first take of like maybe 8 or so. And I think as soon as we said that, Alex and I both looked at each other and was like, that's not right. That we should cut that. We should do some more takes without that. And when we got the video back, they used the first of the 8 takes that we did. So it's not like we don't know. It's just, yeah. Yep.
I have gotten better over time. I used to be a mite bit reactive. I will say, I recognize that. Gotten better over time. All y'all out there who've been saying mean things about Alex Smith, thinking that he doesn't know that we've had Resurrect and Paladin before, cease this behavior immediately. It's not kind, and it's very annoying to see.
Well, we do have a couple of questions that we thought of in case we had extra time, but I think just since we had the opportunity to reveal the new Paladin core stuff, I wanted to make sure that we got this one in on the auras, I guess people are calling them. I remember them as objective, but Paladin class got a bit of a refresh with the core set. What was behind the design team's decision to pivot the core set identity of Paladin away from secrets and toward auras? Did you talk about the possibilities of designing multi-turn effects and like what were, I don't know, concerns with doing so and lack of ability of opponents to interact with them?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a multi-pronged approach here. I think one of the aspects with Paladin was with secrets. I don't think it's necessarily that we thought that they're doomed from the start and we can never revisit them again. However, what we did want to do is like maybe tell a different story with Paladin this year, right? I think we had secrets in for quite a while. We weren't really intending to make a secret archetype this year. So we said, okay, let's just rotate them out for a year and see what happens. Let's see if we can create something else. Obviously, that leaves a void in what Paladin is doing. I think that gives us some room to explore like what else could fit their identity. And it was kind of a question that we've been wanting to tackle with Paladin for a while because they I think are a little bit on the lighter side when you compare it to a class like Druid or Warlock, where they just have lots of access to lots of different things with maybe a certain cost associated with them. When we were scrolling through, like what are things that Paladin could do? I think objectives were a really well received mechanic from Faction Alterac Valley, and they're easily painted. Like we can reskin them. Don't look too hard at them. They are auras now. They're very Paladin. They're very holy. Don't worry about it. So we just decided like, hey, let's give this a spin. Let's take a little bit. Let's be a little bit experimental here. Let's try to give something Paladin, something new and cool, and see how it goes. So I don't want to say that we are like 100%. This is what Paladin is doing for the future forever. We might bring secrets back, we might not. But we just want to add a little bit to their toolkit. See what's up. I think they're going to be a lot of fun in this iteration. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Paladin really likes auras. I think there's a lot of fun design space there. I will say it's almost been a little bit difficult because, we found ourselves at times saying, hey, wouldn't Warrior be fun if it had such and such objective style card? And it's like, okay, well, Demon Hunters have sigils and Paladins have auras. And if we do this style of card in another class and just call it an objective, that's weird. So we don't have a solve for that one just yet. But it's been fun to explore it in Paladin.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really glad we got to ask all these cool questions and looking forward to next time.
It's cool to hear Cora and Gallon, talking through some of those things and thinking how they're thinking about the game, which is a cool thing to hear that we don't always get to hear how their brains work and how they're approaching the game. So it's really cool for them to spend that time with us. And we really do appreciate them taking the time to sit down with us and just talk about everything that's going on in Titans.
Yeah, I always love speaking with Cora and Gallon in particular. I remember them both from, I met them both at tournaments. And so Cora and I, we don't talk a lot, but we stay in touch and are pretty good friends. And Gallon, I just always thought was a delightful person to be around at events. So getting to talk to them in an interview capacity was really, really awesome. I was a little embarrassed that I forgot that Gallon is no longer Final Design. I don't even know who's on Final Design at this point.
They don't really announce when people move around, to be fair. So like there's not really a whole lot of reason for you to know that or for any of us to know that, because they don't really say when people are moving around, with the exception of like a couple times when people have moved from Battlegrounds and back. Sometimes they've said something about it just so people, I guess, so Slyssa stops yelling at them when when she gets offered bad things. I don't know. But they don't typically announce that otherwise. So
I was so excited to get a chance to meet both of them. Feel very lucky. It's very soon after joining as host, I get to meet a couple of the developers, and I really liked how much they got into the nitty gritty of some of the design choices. I especially loved hearing about Forge and the Titans and how the ideas developed over multiple sets, and they really do come back to things and iterate on them and learn from how they're received, even though sometimes the reception takes a lag, but they're always trying so many things in development, and we can really, we know that that's happening, but because it's all opaque, it's easy to think, oh, well, they, only tried out a few cards, and why didn't they do this and this? And actually, they're making hundreds of cards all the time. And there's a lot of thought that's going into everything. And that was just really fun to hear their thought process, even on something like Renathal, that they actually, there was a lot of people, I remember there was a Vicious Syndicate podcast, they were like, Renathal is just bad. Is this card good? We feel like it's bad. And to be fair, on like the first week, people were putting it in the wrong kind of deck. And then people figured it out, and suddenly we had a Renathal meta for quite a while. But I do think the idea of let cards have their time in the sun, while sometimes it's not always going to be to everyone's taste how long a card has its time in the sun or how powerful it is, because it's impossible to have it to everyone's taste. There's certainly been times when I'm like, does this deck have to be this good right now? But It is true that it's one way to keep things fresh and one way to make sure everybody has a time when something that they enjoy is a part of the meta.
Yeah, and the other thing is that it's easy to forget that they're working a year out, right? Like they're working on like next year's 5th set right now. So like, especially with like Control Warrior, that's the kind of thing that is not immediately apparent, that they put some things in, but then if they want to be able to adjust, it's hard for them to like turn the battleship, as it were, right? They just kind of had to let it go and then get there eventually. And sometimes you see that when you see cards that are for like an archetype that came in and nobody was really expecting to be this huge thing, and now it's getting more support. And even though we just had to nerf the last thing, so why are we printing more things? Well, because they're working it out, and nobody thought that it was going to be something that was going to be like I'm thinking of like the Edwin deck last year, right? That nobody really expected, and then all of a sudden we were getting more stuff for that. It's like, well, this is already good. Why are we printing more stuff for it? But that's how far out it's developed, and they can't always react to that in time, other than making slight, changes to the individual cards themselves.
Yeah. Well, speaking of cards,
yeah,
we've got our card superlatives that we're going to do at the end of the show, but also we've got a card theory crafting stream to talk about, which I think is basically just going to be our life and ladder. Is that about right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
I did get triple legend this week, so
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I played Mech Paladin, which, so I started at like 5x last week, and then I just kept jamming the deck until I turned legend. And thanks to World 8 too, for setting me right with some of the decks, with some of the card choices, because he told me to put in Crusader Aura right after the patch dropped, and boy, is that card good in that deck.
Because those are available now because they're just Cora.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's like, because he was like, well, put those in. I'm like, well, next week or now? He's like, don't just go do it now. They're legal. And I'm like, oh. And you have the Mech Windfury dragon, the Windfury Mech dragon.
Yep.
So that just does a lot of damage all at once. So
and that is in standard.
Yep, that is in standard. It's also in wild. And there was one game where I had like a Mech Warper and a Security Automaton on turn 2, and I was playing against a rogue, and they cleared my board except for a 1/1 taunt the Click Clocker, and ended the turn with a 16/16 Edwin, and I won that game. So because it turns out when you spend your whole hand to make a 16/16 Edwin, you can't really deal with a whole bunch of Divine Shield taunts from Bubblebot very easily. So
oh god. Yikes.
But yeah, theory crafting was a lot of fun. And Megase is going to get spoiled now. I mean, we have a dev interview and a theory crafting stream. She's been on the show a week and a half. Getting to do all the things.
this is what the creator program can do, right? You know, we've got an established show enough to be part of the creator program, and then that, you know, boosts new additions. So I think that's exactly what the creator program is supposed to do.
Yeah.
I'm very excited, and I'm also okay with things getting a little bit less hectic. I mean, not immediately, because we're gonna have the new expansion.
Yeah, a couple weeks and things will settle down.
Couple of weeks it'll settle down a bit, and I think I'm very excited. I'm very happy to have all these things going on, and by then I will really need to catch up on my schoolwork before I start the actual fall school year. I have the last week of the summer session off, and they were like, will you come and do like 3 hours of students during that week anyway? And I said, I asked for that off like 4 months ago. No.
What part of week off don't you understand? So
they just
where do
really
we
like your work.
Yeah.
That is what I remind myself. It's a compliment, even if
it's the curse of being good at your job.
Hold my boundaries.
Yeah.
So
where do we want to start? Because we only played one game of Control Priest in the entire 6-hour stream.
And you ruined poor Storm Rage's day. How could you?
It's funny because they've been going on Squelch about how he hates pancakes and loves waffles, and which I just fundamentally don't understand. That's just wrong to me. And so I messaged him right when the game started, just so you know, my deck is full of pancakes. And boy was it, because like that game went on for what, like 25 minutes. We started out with a false disciple because we needed to know what it was going to do, and we got a Herald Village.
And to remind people, Herald Village, the 6-mana legendary that summons a 1/1 copy of all other minions you have in play. So obviously we had to pick that because we have Aman'Thul. We didn't even end up using it on Aman'Thul. We ended up using it on Ragnaros.
Well, that was the second one. That was the second Village because we power word synchronized it. So he was Stormrage was playing an Earthen Paladin, which I just said that's not happening. I mean, we had silences for the death rattles. We got the 4/6 that summons one at the end of the turn from a Mind Eater. So we played that, and that was what we hit with the first Herald Village. I think our Earthens were bigger than his Earthens by the end of the game.
Yeah.
And
pretty early. He actually never got the 4/6.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we did have dueling Prisons of Yogg-Saron. His Prisons of Yogg-Saron were just as good as ours. He got like a Shadow Suffusion with a huge board off of one of them, was able to clear like our giant board of Earthens. And then we just had nothing left at one point. So we said, okay, fine. We're just going to play Prison of Yogg-Saron and go face. And it played a Harmonic Pop into a Jive Insect, which is where we got the first drag from. And then the problem was that the next time that we used it, it cast Fires of Jinajari. So we couldn't actually get to the Aman'Thul or anything else, though that eventually did give us lethal with the G-Lag that it gave us from the deck. So, you know, it kind of, you live by the Yogg and you die by the Yogg, literally. But it was a hell of a game.
One thing that I loved from watching, because the official theory cast with Edelweiss and Lorinda was spectating for most of that game, and I love that you just wanted to see Stormrage playing something acceptable and living his best life, and instead you go in and it's wicked good on Control Priest.
I was like, oh no, I already know what's going to happen.
And after that, we're just like, you know what? We need to put this deck away now, because there's no way we're topping that game ever, and we just need to put this deck away and go on and do anything else. Like, that was it. We just, like, 100% win rate, retired the deck, done, put it away.
Our poor friends over at Blizzlet just wanted to make bigger and bigger men. And
they did. They just didn't live very long, that's all.
Anything you can do, I can do quicker.
We turned them into pancakes. That's what we did. And they were delicious. Especially the one we cannibalized. That one was extra delicious.
I will say, Storm Rage said that game, wow, in some ways miserable because ultimately they lost very slowly. There were lots of swings and comebacks because of the Prison of Yogg-Saron, and some fortunate turns, unfortunate turns both ways, but I still felt kind of in it for a good long while.
Yeah.
Later, they played against No Hands on Priest.
Oh,
and
no.
That was not enjoyable. That was a very, very bad time. And Lerda and I caught that one as well, and we were just like, oh no. Poor Storm Rage as he slowly dies.
See, No Hands is tryharding. I was just there throwing cards. Like, I threw False Disciple in just because I wanted to see what it was going to do. Right? And I saw No Hands' list, and it's like, oh yeah, this is just like make everybody sad. Like that's
except we thought we were witnessing. We're like, oh, No Hands, innovative deck builder. Oh, look, he's doing Astral Automatons. Doesn't play the Astral Automatons until like 20 cards in or something. We're just like, oh no, this is just Control Priest with Astral Automaton stuff for new cards, and like sometimes they get bigger, I guess. But I mean, it was crazy because there's such a dedicated package to playing a bunch of Astral Automatons, but it was still just Priest things and Sister Svalna. And this was the heartbreaker for me. Was like, I knew with a good 15 minutes remaining that it was over because No Hands had played Sister Svalna. So even though Helia came down relatively early, I'm like, yeah, but see, Lorinda, the problem is, as soon as they're a threat, No Hands is not going to draw cards anymore. He's just going to fill his hand up every turn with Love Everlasting, Shadow of Demise, and just burn all of the plagues, because I remember that from the Bomb Warrior meta.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Abyssal Curse strategy. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the world finals that we just had from last year, the Control Priest Mirror, and realizing you can avoid fatigue by keeping your hand full with Sister Svalna, Vision of Darkness.
Yeah.
That was like I don't remember how long that game was. It was like an hour.
It was very unbelievable.
Long. At a certain point, you don't draw the cast wind drawn of that minion anymore.
Oh yeah, Meta. You just burn the yeah.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah, we did try. Priest. Yeah, we did. Well, we did try the Astral Automaton deck, and it was not it. Like it was. It's like, okay, well, we've got these. I mean, first of all, like we had to put so many minions in to try to get copies that we would just like miss on the creation protocol, and that felt terrible. And then when we did get it, it's like, well, okay, we did it. Now we've got a 4/5. Great. It's like, okay, great. I've got a 1 mana 4/5 that doesn't do anything. So I don't. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the Astral Automaton deck didn't feel like it was there. We did. What else did we do? The Relic Demon Hunter felt really good.
Well, one quick thing on the priest. We did Stars Align Priest at the very end. We were like, we have 10 minutes. What do we do? It's Prestor Druid. It is Prestor Druid. We managed to get our Rodden in our hands. And if you draw the Rodden and you have Stars Align, you just have to convert it. It's very sad. But we got a Insatiable Devourer. And that turned out to be just fine.
Oh, that was the other game against Storm Rage. Yeah.
The next one we were not so lucky. We did not get an Insatiable Devourer.
Yeah.
But it is somewhat Prestor Druid-like. I would say probably not as scary as Prestor Druid.
Yeah.
But it is that style. You play a lot of really cheap minions, and you play Stars Align, and then you have bigger minions that are cheap.
And I guess you do the Shadow spell to like tutor for Stars Align, right?
I don't.
I assume so. I don't even remember what's in this deck.
Yeah, I'd have to.
We just drew it. We were just lucky.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just had that skill of drawing the right card.
Yeah, you do have Thrive in the Shadows there, and then so you also have one copy of Illuminate, and so that you can dredge it if it's at the bottom, and then you have 2 Thrive in the Shadows, 2 Stars Align, and the rest of it is all minions, and like most of them are 4 or less. Like the top of the deck is Magatha, Rodden, Amanthul. But
sure.
And you have Finley to throw Raden back at the bottom if you get it before you get the stars aligned, but it's, it's not great. But I mean, you're just running you're running Victorious Vrykul, which is the 1 mana 1/2 that gives you a 1 mana 2/3 when you attack with it.
Okay, see, I think that card is actually good. Just
it might be,
perhaps not in that deck.
Yeah.
So Sottle played a hunter deck with those and just like a bunch of 1-drops. Was even running Ancient Totem, which was perhaps questionable, but this was just like a super all in on Observer of Myths and playing the 4/1 Jormungandr as like a board buff. And so just, I think he had double of the infused Murloc that becomes free, Murlocula, right? And just anything that was like, okay, now we reload again, and then just to threaten the Observer of Myths. It was interesting, but it was very much the like, you kill them by turn 5 or 6 or you lose.
Yeah, we got annihilated by McBanterface playing the Observer of Myths deck. And because one of the things I didn't realize is that Wild Spirits will proc it when you play it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because you have summoned it, it's just dormant. But we did not realize that would happen. So that was very strong.
Does it proc when they awake or when you cast
No,
the
it
spell?
procs when you play the card. When they get summoned. When the dormant ones get summoned.
I don't know if that's better or worse.
I don't know either, but it was spooky because I was not expecting him to get 2 procs off of like a Wild Spirits, right? I mean,
oh, sure.
It has to roll in the right order because if the bear is second, then you only get 1 proc, but otherwise you get 2 procs off of it on the turn that you play it, which is terrifying.
That makes the 2/2 almost better, right? Because you're always going to get the 2/2 itself, and then as long as you don't roll bear, you get another buff.
Yeah. Oh, I think he did have the 2/2. One, maybe the 2/2 was one of them. It might not have been Wild Spirits. It might have been the 2/2.
It was both.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just got totally
twice. Yeah.
destroyed.
It was like we didn't have time, and we were playing. Was that when we were playing the Ramp Druid? It might have been. We were playing something greedy.
Certainly doesn't help.
Yeah.
We were playing the greediest possible Ramp Druid. Either that, or we had just tried to make it less greedy, but it's still a somewhat less greedy Ramp Druid into McBanterface on Hunter. Was just not.
Yeah.
I think we waited after that to make sure that he was in another game before we requeued.
Yeah, we were just like a deer in the headlights. It was like, oh yeah, we just die. Great, okay. But the Relic DH with the cast when drawn cards was really, really good. And it might have just been because we kept hitting Relic of Extinction off of the Shuffle 2 cast when drawn in. Which is pretty good. And we got Argus down, which is the Demon Hunter Titan, and we were like, okay, well, we had a couple of the Relic of Creation, whatever the hell, the
Phantasms.
The Phantasms. Everything's a blur. But so we had like 2 6/6s down, and those are undead, right? So we had an Argus that lived, so we'd already used discount all the other spells in your hand. We didn't really want the 2/2s. Like, okay, let's just get a Death Rattle. We'll see what comes out. Invincible's a Death Rattle. So that was something that we were able to play for 5 mana and make an 11/11 lifesteal on Taunt Undead. That was okay. Argus felt really good too. And that deck was running like Momentum and Multi-Strike with the cast when drawn, because you're just drawing so many cards anyway that Momentum's free, and then you have the Multi-Strike. You just get to do old school aggro DH things, but in Relic DH. So that felt pretty good.
Yeah, I could see Momentum maybe not being as great in like an Outcast or something where it might clog up the side of your hand, but in Relic, where there are turns when you're just drawing a bunch of cards anyway, and then I get 4 free attack, and maybe I have a Multi-Strike, and then that gets doubled. It seemed solid. Didn't seem like it was just filler there for the Titans 10 cards.
Yeah, they threw in some interesting stuff to Demon Hunter, I feel like, in terms of this whole momentum stuff that was one of the ways to play Demon Hunter in WoW. But I imagine a lot of the stuff, particularly the cast when drawn things, are just gonna slot into Relic DH with not
Yep.
a ton of other changes and be good to go. Just because it's a more assured way than Discover to try and roll more relics. So
Yeah. Yep. Or yeah. I mean, and Extinction is just great because like your opponent almost always has a board. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, fine. Get rid of 2 minions, and we get to start the turn with 2 fewer things to worry about. Or you just get 2 big boys on the board. The only one you can't get is Dimensions, which is fine because you probably don't want it drawing you more cards anyway. So
something in terms of people always having a board, I feel like middle sets have typically been more off board, and there's a couple of those with like Shaman and to some extent the Mage, but they've done a remarkable job at keeping things very board based. I think one of my biggest concerns with Titans was, okay, we have these big marquee cards. Are they going to matter? Are they going to ever stick around to use a second ability? And we saw many times, Titans, yeah, majority you try and remove them right away, but sometimes you just can't. And so they do stick around for multiple turns, and you really get to go through all those abilities. The weirdest thing for people was realizing some of the interactions with the whole attack is a cost that you must pay to use the abilities. So I think it did weird people out when their Titan was frozen and they couldn't use the ability and they were confused. Or Lorinda and I saw one instance where someone had the Rogue Titan, they used the last ability, and then they got a Spark Bot to Magnetic and give it Wind Fury. So then they got to actually attack because the last ability was used, and then they got that one attack because it spent one on the ability and then it got another one and so could attack one time. So there's going to be some weird stuff for people to adjust to. I don't think anything wrong has been done. I think it's just going to be an adjustment period.
Yeah, it's a new type of card, right? Like it's going to take time to figure out how those cards behave, and you'll learn once you play them a couple times. Like I didn't think that Observer of Myths was going to proc off of Wild Spirits, but here we are, right? So it's fine. I'm trying to think of what else. The Control Warlock was fun when we got to cheat out the Sargeras with the Thaddeus off the usual thing. Yeah.
If you could get out the Sargeras, it was extremely powerful. But the question is just, whether you can get down the Sargeras. But even when we paid 9 for it, in at least one game, we paid the full price and it was fine.
Yeah.
It still really did some work. I think it was against a slower deck. I can't remember exactly what our opponent was playing. It did struggle somewhat against more aggression, but at least the way that we had built it, less than the Ramp Druid did, in terms of trying to keep itself alive. Even something like the sacrifice your own minion to kill an opponent minion, and you can target both of those, was stronger than I thought it might be.
Yeah.
That actually seemed pretty solid. And I mean, especially if you already have Sargeras out, because you're getting those imps back anyway. You have a full board. We're sitting there with we can't play anything because our board is full of enormous minions. Oh no. This is so terrible. But yeah, so Sargeras felt powerful. I just don't know when we have the proper actual non-theory crafting meta, how often you'll be able to get him. But if you can cheat him out with Thaddeus, then obviously that's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And we tried to get the Lightning, Thunder, Storm Shaman to work. And we had Leptin in chat she built the deck. And we were trying to do it, and we got close, but we always felt like we were missing one piece of something. Like we got to a point where we were just hard mulliganing for Flash of Lightning, because we felt like we needed it in order to be able to do the combo, and we just never found it. We'd either have all the damage but none of the discounts, or all the discounts but none of the damage, but we never got everything to kind of come together all at the same time. So the spell school mage worked the couple times that we played it. I don't think we ever actually used Sif, just because we just had enough with everything else that was going on. And we got that was go ahead.
I was just the mage definitely seemed like it had plenty of damage, and it's fun to be able to discover the spells from different schools. I liked what they said about having the spell school mage to be something both that feels very magey and something that feels new. I think that those are both true. And the shaman, it's a hard deck to co-op because you
Oh,
need
yeah.
to kind of go in, and it's also a deck where you really need to kind of know what you're doing. So I don't know if we were too afraid to play combo pieces to stay alive, although we still did more of that, and then you're out of stuff. Our hand would get full, and then we can't draw, but we still don't have the pieces that we need. But I don't know whether that's, I don't know that that necessarily says anything about where Shaman's going to be in the actual set. If it needs to lead more into the overload, I'm not sure. But at least we didn't have success with it. That's all we can really say.
From watching Banter play that deck, they're going to be just fine. I think it's a little challenging to do, and Banter picks up on those decks a little bit faster. It has like a plan A and a plan B in the sense that you can go for spell damage for your lethality, or you can go with the Wind Fury weapon for your lethality.
Yeah.
And so it's just going to be that balance of like, okay, how much can I spend on clearing the board to keep myself alive while keeping enough burn to get over the finish line? But you do sort of need to go, okay, I used all my stuff to clear in terms of damage, so now I've got to go for, doubling my weapon attack buffs with the Wind Fury weapon, or vice versa, right? I had to use the weapon to clear some big stuff, so I need to make sure to OTK them with spell damage. But the amount that you can do once you've forged the minion that summons elementals every time you cast a nature spell, like just to have that board in a box, and then play the give everything spell damage. There were some 17 damage lightning bolts we saw hitting people. So yeah, but we're about an hour in because of the interview, so we should probably move on to talking about some patch notes, tournaments, and we can do our card superlatives.
Yeah, let's do that.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right, so we do have patch 27.0, which came out yesterday, and I'm trying to get it up on the stream, and I'm not sure why it's not showing up, but oh, there it is. Okay, so we got patch 27.0 on Tuesday. There's not really a lot that's unexpected in here. A lot of it was stuff that we know about. Titans obviously is a big part of it. We're getting an in-game event, which I think we all pretty much would have expected by now with the launch of a new set, Old Juar Grand Championship. So there's going to be packs all the way up until a new Death Knight hero skin at the very end of it. You'll have quests to do. You can either do them or just play Hearthstone, and you'll get there probably. Up to you. They reiterate that the Paladin auras are there, and they are playable in Constructed right now. So you can go put those in your deck. We got a couple of changes to Battlegrounds. They added a couple of new quests. One that adds a Death Rattle card to your hand, and then your Death Rattles trigger an extra time each turn. And then there's the same thing for Battle Cries. So you can use those you can go for those in Battlegrounds. They also tweaked the armor. They tweaked quest rewards. They changed the wording on Bristleback Knight to remove the frenzy keyword from it, because Bristleback Knight is Wind Fury Divine Shield. It used to say frenzy gain Divine Shield. Now it says the first time this survives damage gain Divine Shield. And what that allows them to do is allow the golden to say the first 2 times that this survives damage gain Divine Shield, because there's no double frenzy keyword. So that just allows them to give that extra boost to the golden version. Then they changed some wording to be shorter. So they changed tavern tier to tier. They changed Bob's Tavern to the tavern. Add to your hand has been shortened to get. Same thing they've been doing in Constructed. They've been doing a lot of work just to tighten up the language. So they did the same thing in Battlegrounds. Duels is losing Diablo. So for those of you who were not a fan of Diablo, you're welcome. Which means that Rattlegore is no longer banned. that they're adding Ashes to Outland to the card pool. Moog Artificer and Kael'thas Sunstrider are both banned, and are banned from all card pools, and then banned from deck building are Akama, Bulwark of Azzinoth, Incanter's Flow, and all of the Titan minions. So, if you are looking to play duels, that's some additional options that are available to you. Arena is the interesting thing in this patch because the Titans cards are available to draft in Arena right now. And that is something that they have not done since... I heard Goblins versus Gnomes. I want to say they did this in the Grand Tournament, because I remember this happening once, and I was not playing when GVG came out. So I want to say the Grand Tournament they did this too, but it's been a long, long time since they've had the cards in Arena pre-release. So if you want to play with the new cards, and then you can go draft them in Arena. I know Blister Guy was doing that on Walk to Work this week and took an entire episode to draft the deck, and then he's going to play it later on. So you could do that and kind of get used to the cards before they come out. Twist is going to end on August 1st. We knew that, and it will be coming back on September 1st with a new format and a new fun surprise. So no word on whether MMR will carry over, whether that's going to be New Age or something else. They'll tell us when it gets closer. I wouldn't be surprised if the Twist seasons lagged the constructed releases by like a month, and have 2-month formats, so that you kind of have like, okay, well, maybe if you're getting tired of the constructed meta, then you have Twist a month later. And then you have the mini set the following month, and then you have a new Twist season the following month after that. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was on that cadence, but I don't know anything. I'm just kind of speculating, but. And then we got a bunch of bug fixes. They fixed a bug where triggering a reduced cost secret caused a crash on mobile. Fixed a bug where comboing Solar Eclipse and Funnel Cake would refresh the wrong amount of mana crystals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I want to be the person who figured that out. That sounds fun.
Fixed a bug where Sir Finley swapped the cards in your hand into your deck in the order that they entered your hand instead of the order that they were held in your hand. This is specifically for Vision of Darkness, because Vision of Darkness would always be the first one. It would always be like the last one, because it would have entered your hand last, even though it would continue moving over to the left based on when you played it, because it stays visually in place after you play it, but it re-enters your hand as far as the algorithm is concerned on the right. So now the order in which you see the cards is the order that they're going into your deck. So anyone who's not a priest main probably does not care about this at all. Though I guess like Bunch of Bananas and Barrel of Monkeys might be affected by this too. Fixed a bug where a spell that was with its cost reduced by Infinitize the Maxitude would keep the cost reduction when discovered again by Rewind. I didn't know this was a thing, but that's mildly terrifying. So I'm glad they fixed that. Fixed a bug where Cannibalize triggered the overheal of the minion it destroyed. You don't want to see that happening to you. We'll just enjoy that for a second. Fix a bug where remixed musician could not be silenced. Someone has now cut his mic. Fixed a bug where a magnetic minion next to a dormant minion could allow you to have 8 minions on the board. That's another one I would have liked to figured out. And fixed a bug where Jerry Rig Carpenter's effect could cause crashes. They updated Zarok's Crown. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. Nobody else does either. Magnetic, and in Battlegrounds, magnetic minions now return to the minion pool immediately after being magnetized. So that's important. So presumably they only return to the pool after the minion that they were magnetized onto was sold, and now they go back in the pool immediately.
That's nice.
So if you're playing mechs and you need Replicating Menace, it'll be easier to find those, presumably. And Bob's Burgles can no longer be activated, which is Tess Greymane's hero power, can no longer be activated if your last opponent had no minions. And there's some other miscellaneous bug fixes around solo adventures, and they fixed the hero tray for Inga, and they fixed a visual bug where Battlegrounds was clipping on phones, so they fixed that. One thing that they did not list here, which is a kind of a big deal. So it's been part of the game from the beginning where if you have one of each totem on board as a shaman, you couldn't press the hero power. And now you can.
Yay!
That was confirmed by Aleko on Twitter, that it wasn't listed in the patch notes, but apparently that's a thing you can do. So
so leading up to having one of each, does it still always give you one that you don't have yet?
I would assume so. I don't know how that works. I would imagine that it still gives you one of each until you have 4, and then it just gives you random ones.
Sure.
I can remember being new at the game and not being able to press my hero power as shaman and being like, what is this? Why can I not press this button?
Yeah. It is confusing when you run into it. I do like Squelch's suggestion that if you have all 4 on board, it should give you the spell power totem. But yeah, that's it for the bug fixes. We also got, with the new patch and the new expansion, we have updated returning player decks. So usually they only have 6, so they don't have one for each class, but they have 6 that are available at a time. You have a ramp druid. We have what looks like a hound hunter, a Vexilus arcane burn mage. We have pure paladin, totem shaman, and enraged warrior, and they're fairly close to the current pre-Titans versions of those decks. So if you're starting up a collection on another server, or somebody's getting back into the game, then you can evaluate those both for what's playable and also how many legendaries each one has. So we also got the rewards track. The rewards track information. So it's fairly similar to the other ones that we've gotten. There's no real surprises. I don't think we've got enough to talk about that. I don't think we need to go into the nitty gritty of it, but you can go read through if you have anything that you're really looking for. There's new coins. There's a diamond, Algalon, and Eonar. So Algalon's at the beginning of the paid rewards track. Eonar is at the end of it. And then you have the two coins, one of which is on the track. The other one is once you have 145 cards. So you can go check that out. There are portraits for all 9 classes and signature non-legendary cards, the usual things. So we do
the Sargeras portrait is pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
I will say that one thing. That's the only one that there are some other ones that are cool on the Tavern Pass, but the Sargeras is the one that I'm excited for.
Yeah. Oh, and if you go to the Play Hearthstone Twitter, they have been posting these Sargeras Bob Ross shorts, which are delightful, and you should go watch them. They are very entertaining. We also have known issues, as we do with any patch. So if you were watching the Theory Crafting streams, you were probably not noticing a lot of Always a Bigger Jormungandr, and that's because it was not working with Hollowhound. So that's most of the reason that people wanted to play it. So right now what it does is it only does the damage to the hero through the minion that it attacked. It will be fixed prior to Titans with a patch to get it to work correctly. Imprisoned Horror's cost is being reduced by Blood Treant. Blood Treant is not supposed to... Imprisoned Horror is a 9-mana 5/5 that gets cheaper with all damage you've taken on your own turns. Blood Treant is a 5-cost treant that you pay for with health. Paying for health is no longer supposed to discount the Imprisoned Horror effects, but this one does. They will fix that before launch. And then Forest Seedlings and Frost Lotus Seedlings, which are the cards that improve after X number of turns, have been counting the mulligan turn in those turns. So if Frost Lotus Seedling says improves in 3 turns. If you had it in your opening hand, it would start on turn 1 with 2 turns. So they're going to fix that prior to launch as well. They're investigating reports that cards that go into the secret zone, so secrets, auras, love everlasting, that are cast by Nogglings are not working. So be aware of that when you're playing them. They're looking into reports that queuing into a private Battlegrounds lobby with fewer than 8 players will result in players automatically being added to the lobby, which is not what you want to see. And there was a Sarge's deal in the shop for 5 standard packs for $1 or whatever one of your local currency is, that they've been having a lot of issues with getting it to work. And it's apparently working in NA now, or in Americas now, but EU is still an issue. So it says that they resolved that on 7/26, which is yesterday. So hopefully, if you're trying to get Sarge's deal and you couldn't get it, you probably should, because 5 packs for $1 that you can open up and get all Titans cards if you have all non-Titans cards in your collection. That's a pretty good deal, so you should go take a look at that. But if you're having trouble in EU, you can go give that another try. And apparently Algalon the Observer was showing the top card of the deck to both players, not just the player who used the hero power. So they will be looking at fixing that. And Lord Barrow got removed from Battlegrounds because he did something bad. So.
And this is actually a nice thing about the theory crafting streams. Also, I think some of these things were shown before the theory crafting streams. Like they told us don't play the Hollow Hound interaction with the always a bigger Yormonger, because that won't work. But sometimes things get surfaced because of the theory crafting, and that's a nice way to give them at least a little advance notice before the expansion properly launches and for everyone.
Yeah. When you get like McBanterface and No Hands Gamer trying things that they're not going to think of, right? Like you'll find interactions that you might not have planned to test or not retested since you made some change last minute. So that's all well and good. A couple of miscellaneous, not necessarily Hearthstone, but Blizzard centric news items. So one is that Blizzard games will be coming to Steam. So we're starting with Overwatch 2 next month. That'll be coming to Steam. So there's potential for Hearthstone to come to Steam eventually. This is very likely something to do with the Microsoft merger, probably happening in the next couple of months. We'll see. Now that it's cleared the FTC in the US and it's just got the UK to get through. So that's Microsoft has all their games on Steam. It's not really a surprise, but that's something that they're working on to kind of break that hard link between the Battle.net launcher and the game itself. You will still need a Battle.net account to play online if you are playing in Steam, but you don't need to use the Battle.net launcher to launch the game. And the other Blizzard focused, not necessarily Hearthstone focused news article is that there were apparently, unfortunately, a lot of layoffs in Blizzard esports as a whole, particularly centering around Overwatch League. So a number of people were let go. I think it was like 55 people that were let go, unfortunately, including people who were working on like a new tournament management system that they were using internally that they'd not completely finished yet, and they were told to not really look for any improvements in the old one. It sounds like Overwatch League in general is something that they're reevaluating as a whole. It didn't sound like this affected Hearthstone esports. Hearthstone esports has kind of already gone through a lot of this type of scaling back over the last year or so, but not really a surprise. I guess more of a surprise given that Overwatch League was supposed to be the premier Blizzard esports league, but it's also been having its share of problems over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue with all this was we'll have no way of knowing, but Overwatch League kind of launched alongside COVID. And so while it was supposed to be this big thing of cities would be rooting for their teams and people would go to new esports arenas to watch people play, and then they literally were not allowed to do that and asked not, right? Because you're not going to any kind of sporting games. And while, established Major League sports already had the base to be able to endure that and figure out, COVID bubbles or whatever, find ways to still do it. This was a new thing. And so it just basically couldn't launch the way it was intended because of COVID. And esports has had other issues in general, even though I think it is on the up and up in terms of more and more people over time will be into it. It still just doesn't compare to mainstream sports in terms of viewership, and therefore in terms of getting sponsorship deals to keep everything running. So I'm kind of bummed. I really liked the idea of having an esports team to root for various cities. Right, while I was in Philly, we had the Philly Fusion, and so I was like, yeah, let's go. I like have no interest in Overwatch, but I checked out some Philly Fusion games just for the streams and stuff because it's cool to root for the city you live in. But my understanding is that people were like offered, I don't know if this is true, but like offered money basically to disband. like basically it was so not worth it. They were like, we will pay you so that we can shut down Overwatch League. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Boston Uprising jersey in my closet that I guess is probably going to be a collector's item now, but I like the idea too, and I could never really get into watching Overwatch because I would get seasick trying to follow it, but I like the idea of it. It was cool, and just never really. I remember being at PAX that year, like right before it was like 2 weeks before everything shut down for COVID, which in retrospect, I'm very thankful that we didn't all like get sick because they were like wiping down the escalator rails because everybody thought that you were getting it from like touching things and then getting them in your mouth or whatever. So they just had people like literally standing at the base of the escalator, just holding a wet wipe over the escalator rail as it went by. But I remember going by an Overwatch League booth then, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to be starting up in June." I'm like, "No, you're not." Like, we're going to have our home game in I don't know if it was the TD Garden or whatever. I'm like, "No, we're not going to that. That's not happening. Absolutely not." Yeah.
And then salt in the wound, Valorant came out.
Yep.
And just kick them to the curb, right? Because they were not trying to do a team for every city thing. They followed sort of more of the same stuff they did with League of Legends in terms of the sport. And Riot kind of has I was going to say a different term, but the money. They have the money to just go with it, right? And people really, really love the gameplay of Valorant, and as Overwatch was kind of on the downswing, more and more people picked up Valorant.
Yep. Well, I mean, Overwatch kind of stagnated for 3 years after they announced Overwatch 2, right? So that didn't help either. I mean, Valorant kind of rose to prominence in those years when Overwatch wasn't doing anything because they were rewriting the client. So, but I guess that's enough talking about other esports, and I guess we should talk about our own esport for a bit, huh?
It's the grand tournament.
So we had the Lobby Legends event. If you're wondering about promotion, you're right. There wasn't any again. I didn't realize this was happening. It's really hard to find this stuff. I even was like trying to go back to look at the VODs so I would have something to say about all this. And I realized that you basically have to go look at the Twitch VOD or directly search like Hearthstone Lobby Legends in YouTube for it to bring up the YouTube VOD. Because if you go to the Hearthstone channel and look at videos, it's not there. They, I guess, like streamed it to both Twitch and YouTube. So what's on YouTube is it says, streamed X number of days ago, right? So it's basically the YouTube equivalent of the VOD from the stream rather than a video on their channel.
Wow.
So a little tricky to find if you're trying to do it on YouTube. Search directly. Don't go to the Hearthstone channel and then look for it in their videos. But I did find it. A couple of highlight games. Group A, Game 3, Citro, I believe it is, had a pretty nutty game with ETC and Snicker Snacks. Snicker Snacks is the quest that does 2 of your battle cries again at the end of your turn. And so Citro just had the Sire Denathrius buddy for a bit, just giving more and more of the quest that gives you 8 gold when you complete it, the like simple quest. So power leveled to tier 6, just overflowing with gold and just doing these crazy turns until eventually he just had an absurd amount of stats. I forget if it was dragons or here's what it was. Veilstra's battle cry, you get a dragon from your tavern tier. And I think he got 7 Caligos.
Oh my god.
So it was one of those lobbies where it was do your best to not die when you face this person and you will advance. And everyone failed to do that. So the ranking of that game was just who faced Citro last, because he once the 6 geese were online, or 2 goldens, really once 1 golden and a couple were online. I mean, it was just 1-hit kills against everyone. And you would see people go like, okay, well, the last opponent took 26 damage, so dragons. All right, what tech can we do against dragons? And he had picked up an Indina as well. It was pretty absurd. So that's game 3, or it's its final game of Group A. First game of Group B, Odd Dragon had a pretty cool thing going on with Bongo Bopper and Charlga, and then the quest that doubles your end of turn effects. Usually it gives you some minion and then double that with an end of turn effect, and then doubles your end of turn effects once you complete it. Then, of course, he also had the Drakari Enchanter, which doubles your end of turn effects again. So the Bongo Bopper was just, giving him a full hand of blood gems that had been, upgraded from the things that do that, and then playing them on itself. And it was as Illidan, so you get the immediate attacks. He picked up a Foe Reaper and just went ham on buffing its attack with the blood gems. It was pretty silly. And these are all, not being really much of a BG's player myself, these are sort of what strike me as the highlight games, because they're just sort of wacky. So then, final game of Group B, Jeef it was just a really fun game to watch because he had Yogtastic Tasties. So, I mean, they would go to his turn frequently for the start of the shop phase just to see what he was rolling on the Yogg wheel. Lorinda on the spectate over there for that. So that was good fun just to see sort of what was rolled every time and how it all panned out. So during all this, there was kind of a caster competition going on between TJ and Slissa, who are our lovely casters for the event. And they had these mini games. There was they were called Puzzle Box, Fantasy Team, which is basically just they picked players fantasy football style. Bandwagon, which I think was predictions on who was gonna on people's placement for the lobby. I don't remember that one exactly. And then Barov's Blessing at some point in the middle of the game, Lorinda would bring up 2 people, and so they had to pick who they thought was going to win that face off. And I think chat would be polled and vote on it as well. So fun interaction there. The puzzle box was just sort of before the day began. It was a list of all these kind of things. Do you think this is going to happen today? Yes or no? And they filled in their answers and would check back in at the end of the day how each of them did. Well, there was a penalty for the loser of this after the first day, although it almost seemed like Slissa wanted to do this. If you watch nothing else, check out on the VOD for day 2, so the top 8 VOD. Slissa, wearing a Happy Cow onesie, does a rap in quotations. She could work on her rap style, but the lyrics were incredible. She managed to fit 20-something odd references to Hearthstone stuff or BG stuff.
Was this like the Pokey
in the
rap
lyrics
but
to
for
this.
Hearthstone or something? Like what?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, for as much as she could work on some of the delivery in terms of, like, I don't know if it really felt rap like, the lyrics were on point. It was so good.
I'm
So-
envisioning like 8th grade school assignment rap. Like that's kind of what I'm envisioning.
Yeah, no, she knocked it out of the park on the lyrics. I think she worked so hard on that. So that was really cool to see. But in terms of that top 8 day, and just what happened, Tomb was the first to put the lobby in check after I think 4 games. Yeah. And then Waterloo, who had been doing pretty poorly in the first 3 games, just managed to overtake and ended up winning in 6 lobbies. I guess it was mostly the first 2 games for Waterloo were not great. So 3 points, then 1.5 points. Then lobby 3, 5.5. Lobby 4, 4.5. Lobby 5, 1, and then lobby 6, 1 to win it all. Rare instance of the first place player actually having 1 fewer point than the second place player, because just able to, win in check faster. I mean, that can happen sometimes. And then Tomb actually ended up getting 3rd, even though he put the lobby in check the fastest. So really interesting how this whole check system works out. Yanase got 2nd in that 6th lobby, and so had Yanase been able to pull out the win, we would have then had 5 people putting the lobby in check, and so it could have been just like a whole different ball game. It's crazy, like how just the longer it goes, the more of a shot people have to just win out of nowhere. So they didn't do check for the first day because you just gotta save time, right? So it's just most points after 3 lobbies to get into the day 2, but it was enjoyable to check out. I have to say, day 2 had a lot of Murlocs, and so there were a lot of like weird base skill scam boards that I'm just like, oh, so this is how the pros play with base skill, because I never play properly with base skill, like however that works, because you gotta keep a whole bunch of stuff in hand. They would be having plays where like they've got a Baron Rivendare in play and a golden base skill, and then just these 4 minions specifically curated to be left in hand, and they don't accidentally play them. And so mid-fight, it's like base skill dies, they get this refill, and it's like 2 venomous and like a taunt to mess up the opponent who has the volatile venom. So they're doing a bunch of tokens, but since Anoyo summons all these 1/2s, the volatiles like die hitting into them. There's all this wacky stuff that happens. Go check it out. If you remotely understand what's happening in BGs, or even if you don't, maybe you'll learn something. So yeah, that was Lobby Legends. But we also had Clark's Hellscream Cup 2. This one was not an invitational. It was open entry. The casters were Den, CCG, Rabobson, and Rami. And the format was to bring 4 decks, ban 1 Conquest, as we are accustomed to. And then, unlike last time, decks could be made ahead of time. But it did still have a list of 30 banned cards, and this time there was a list of required cards, notably including ETC and Prison of Yogg-Saron. Friend of the show, Donkey, who still has one of the most utilized websites in Hearthstone, managed to come out on top. And then the rest of the top 8 in order were Patrick, Chewy, Zythulu, One Manuel, Esipetres, Linny managed to make it into the top 8, and then Madrigal. So, yeah, it's cool to see Clark doing these tournaments. For sure, go check that out if you have some time. I'll bet there was some great casting going on between Robson, Rami, and Den, and it's just like a wacky event with all kinds of off-meta stuff because everything meta was banned. So
I was able to catch some of it and then see some highlights, and I did enjoy it. The first game that I watched, Donkey actually won with like a pretty straightforward undead priest tempo, except there was also a prison of Yogg. But the prison of Yogg absolutely stole the show. One of the games in the finals, it was a control priest mirror, and Donkey got a Rivendare out of a paparazzi and managed to not get anything drowned. And the final horseman killed with their own prison of Yogg-Saron set it up to do as much damage to it themselves as they could, and then killed it with the prison of Yogg-Saron. And that was not the only game decided by the prison of Yogg-Saron in that game. Although Donkey said on the Discord, quote, "They should have also shown my Yogg from the semifinals when I needed 1 damage, but I ended up healing my opponent for 8.
But did he cast a Fires of Zinashari? Because,
I don't know. I should definitely go back and check out those games because I didn't have a chance to watch the all of the day 2. But if you are into off-meta games, this was definitely enjoyable.
Well, I think we've spent plenty of time on tournaments. We should get to these card superlatives because it's going to be a while, and I may have to fight with Wicked over something.
Oh, good. I'm looking forward to a fight, especially at 9:45 at night. Let's go.
All right. So I'm starting this one. Okay. So we are doing our typical preset review instead of going through every card, because we've already been here for a long time. We each pick 1 card from 5 categories. So those are card you can't wait to play with, card you're scared of, card you want to be good but isn't, card you think is over or underrated, and card you don't understand. And for our other 2 hosts who were here for the last time that this happened, we will also say what their picks were last time and see if we want to congratulate them for a job well done or tease them for not quite getting it right. So I'm sure this will happen to me in a few months. The first category was card that you can't wait to play with. And my pick was Mimiron the Mastermind, which I almost put for card you're scared of. We didn't actually have a chance to play Mech Rogue in the theory crafting, but we faced it probably more than anything else. People who started playing it seemed to really enjoy it and just keep playing it. Like, we'd run into the same person, they're still playing Mech Rogue like 45 minutes later. And there's definitely a number of impressive cards in there, but the one that really stood out was Mimiron. Mimiron, to remind people, is the legendary keeper. 3 mana, 2/5. After you play a mech, get a random one of Mimiron's gadgets. And Mimiron, of course, is also a mech. And the gadgets are mostly 1 mana, do a bunch of things, or there's a 0/1 that discounts your next card by 2. And there's one that like swaps stats. There's one that gives a friendly minion +3 attack and stealth. There was so much stealth on all of these minions. They would give Mimiron stealth with a spark bot or with its own gadget, and then just get so many of these things and make these ridiculously huge magnetized mechs, or if they needed to go wide, make it go wide. I think we'll be talking a little bit later about the card that replicates, but if you get that onto the Mimiron and then you have 2, 4, however many, just impossible to kill Mimirons unless you have like a whirlpool. And this is coming down a lot earlier than turn 8. So I know that some, I'm not a huge Miracle Rogue player, so I know that some of the Rogue mains, maybe this isn't exactly what they were looking for in Rogue, but I'm really excited. It still feels like you're playing a lot of cards in a turn and having these big spike turns, but it's a sort of minion snowbally deck. We did also play Edelweiss's Miracle Rogue. We played 1 game of it and we had 100% win rate. So that was fun. And it worked pretty well. I mean, there's a lot of small cards even, the Spark bots and that kind of thing, that was just a really small mech package just to give more things that you can play all at once, and then you can make a really large ghost. And that also worked pretty well. But I am really excited for actually getting my hands on the mech rogue, and it seems like it could be pretty powerful. At least we sometimes we were fine against it, and sometimes we struggled a little bit against it. So I don't know whether that was what you saw, Elvis, when you were looking at people play it.
Oh yeah, definitely saw a few people starting to try the Mech Rogue. Caught Pizza playing it, and there were just some ridiculous things with Lab Reconstructor, just copying stuff.
We queued into Pizza a couple times. Yeah.
The amount of magnetized things, and like you say, the amount of stealth you can keep something around to magnetize onto and get to play the Lab Reconstructor was pretty filthy. And so you'd see these, huge Mimiron boards or like squirrels or whatever, just sticking around, summoning copies, being stealthed, and just being pretty massive. Honestly, I'm worried about it, not because I'm worried about the rogues, but because I think a big weakness of it will be Shard of the Naru. And I don't want people to be encouraged to play Priest because they're scared of the Mech Rogue. But
yeah. I mean,
Silence
I guess...
and Transform.
Yeah. Yeah, Primordial Wave, and, clean the scene's fine too. I feel like we've learned, and I guess maybe this goes back to what Gallon was saying about start the cards high and then know that they can nerf them. I felt like we've learned our lesson with really powerful 3-drops with 5 health and Rogue, like, repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 seems like we had a couple times where we could like get it down to 1, right? Like we had like a multi-strike or something, and we were able to like just get it chipped down to 1, and all it needed was that 1 health to just go way the hell off. And so I'm kind of worried about it in that respect. I would not be surprised to see this come down to a 2-4 or a 1-4 even, but it's pretty strong.
All right. Well, Edelweiss, why don't you tell us about the card that you can't wait to play with?
So I'm really excited for Sif, and I would like to say part of the excitement here, both for Mimiron and Sif, is the signatures in this expansion are just incredible, crazy good art, particularly for these two, but across the board. Sif, Mage Keeper, who gets +1 spell damage for each spell school you've cast this game, and starts with 1. So that ramps up very quickly. Mage, of course, has sort of 3 base: Fire, Frost, Arcane. If you're playing Shadow Reverberations or whatever that card is called, it's got Shadow as well then. And then they've got Prismatic Elemental and the new 1-cost spell to kind of get even more spell schools that are not sort of native to Mage. So you can pretty consistently get to like 5 spell damage and just go in with those 1-mana Arcane Bolts for an OTK in the late game, or the new Fire spell that if you forge it, it casts twice. So you target your opponent's face with that, and it effectively benefits doubly from the spell damage that you get off Sif. So I think it'll take some refining to settle on a proper build for a Sif deck. And I would have loved for that deck to include my pick from last set, which was Light Show. But I think, unfortunately, Lorinda's probably correct, where you build the Light Show deck, and then you take out the Light Shows, and it's a better deck.
I will say
Did you
that...
see anyone playing? You go.
Well, I was going to say, like, we got an Unleash Fel at one point from one of the discovers. And, like, we're holding on to this because this is just going to be no end of fun in a deck with Sif in it. And I don't even know if we actually used Sif for the lethal. I think we just had, like, Egwin buffs or whatever. Yeah. But I think we could have had Sif lethal, but I wasn't doing that math that quickly. But it seems like it's definitely powerful. It can get there. And yeah, the art, like, I'm really hoping that they put the signature art on the... If you don't know, they have Blizzard Press Center. If you just Google it, they put like the full art without like the card text on it on the website, so you can download that. And I will make that Sif art, my new foam wallpaper, because it is absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, the deck, like we played that was the first thing we played because I was very excited to try that, and it felt pretty strong. It felt like it could get there. Like, I think if we had a few more reps on it and kind of knew what we were doing, that we would have been able to be a little bit more productive with it. Like, you need to know some of that math pretty well, and I'm the kind of person who has to memorize like the breakpoints for math for spell damage and things like that in order to figure out like what the damage is going to be, because otherwise then I start counting on stream and that's just embarrassing. So but it does feel really, really strong, and it feels like it's going to take Burn Mage into a new direction for sure.
I have one like pet card for that, which no one has ever played in a year and a half, so it's probably not going to change now. But Lady Nazjar from Sunken City is the legendary Naga that changes based on whether you've played a Fire, Frost, or Arcane. And the Arcane one is that it discounts all spells in your hand, not just Arcane ones, by 1. And of course, that does make your Arcane bolts free, but it also makes your Frozen touches cost only 1. So you do have to find time to put down, I believe she's 5 mana. But so that is something that you have to find time to do. But I could see that making the Sif turn a lot easier if we even need that much more damage. There's also possible you just don't need that much more damage on your Sif turn. But theoretically, you could go like 5-6 and then put a bunch of free spells into your opponent's face.
I mean, if you want to reverb the Sif, then you need to have the spells discounted.
That's true. All right. So how about you, Wicked Good?
Well,
I think we all know the answer to this one.
Yeah, the surprising no one, right? It's Amenthul and it's not close. Like, it's a really powerful priest legendary. So Amenthul is the priest titan. After this, uses an ability to discover a legendary minion. It's a 7 mana 3/10, and its abilities are remove two minions from the game, summon a random 6-drop. It gets taunt and lifesteal, and then make a copy of a minion on board. It gets +2/+2. So yeah, we didn't actually get to play this in any of the priest decks. We only got to play this when we reverbed it from an opponent. So I'm interested to see what it's like when we're actually playing it on purpose. But like, all those effects are things that I want to do, and after it uses an ability, you get a legendary minion. So I actually forgot about that when we used the ability, and then I'm like, well, what's this discover? Oh right, we get a free legendary. So, and that's from any class. So it's just going to be a lot of fun to try to figure out like what the best strategies are going to be. Like, what is it going to offer you? What are you going to take? What are you going to need later? Because it's probably not going to be something you're going to be using right away, right? So it's going to be a lot of trying to figure out like what kinds of things are going to be useful later in the game, or even in the next couple of turns, but you're probably not going to be able to play right now unless it's like a Thalnos or something that you can play right away. I just think it's a really, really cool bomb for Priest. That it gives Priest some potentially another win con that's not just fatigue, right? Like, you can use the legendaries the way that Pure Paladin would use the legendaries out of the Countess, right? Like, sometimes you'll just get something that gives you a win con to play towards that you might not have had otherwise. It's probably not going to make your opponent feel any better about it, but it's something that you can at least like build towards and maybe have like a G-Lag that you're looking to get some damage out of, or something like that at least can give you something other than, well, I'm just going to wait until you lose the will to live.
Audio listener, if you are not in the stream, you can't see Edelweiss's face right now. But she is so unamused by this.
I'm going to wait till the end.
Okay.
We will wait on that. Well,
Card is listed later.
The card is listed later again, yes. We definitely had fun when we reverbed it.
Yes.
And were able to play it as mage. It was also good in that deck when you get it for 3 mana. So that was...
You were using it for good and not for evil.
got it into your class and then corrupted
I
it
think
with an
Edel might
Amanthul.
actually be more upset that it was that way that we were getting the Amanthul. That we were defiling her deck with the Amanthul.
Wicked, what are you scared of?
Really quick on the last two, the cards that we picked from last time for card you can't wait to play with. Edelweiss, you picked Light Show, which might have been what I had picked at the time as well. And Wicked Good, you picked Love Everlasting as the card you couldn't wait to play with.
So, and I did, and I played it a lot, and it was good, and I enjoyed it.
All right, well, Wicked, what is the card that you're scared of?
So I am terrified of Observer of Myths after getting beaten about the head and shoulders with it by McBanterface repeatedly. I mean, we already kind of talked about it. Again, it's a 2-mana 1/4 Hunter minion. After you summon a minion with more attack than this, give all friendly minions +1 attack. Those boards snowball really fast. Like, really fast. And if you can't answer it, you just die. It's like a preemptive Bloodlust. You have a little bit more time because generally not all the minions are hitting you in the face immediately, but like you have to have an answer to that board right now or you just die. And how quickly this came on board is really what surprised me a lot, just because the dormant minions proc it, or you have the 4/1s from the spell, or just like play stuff because it starts at 1, right? And hunter minions are generally bigger than that. So it just gets to snowball so quickly. And we just looked at it and we're like, okay, I guess we die now because there's nothing to do about it.
I'm also excited to play it, but it definitely snowballs hard. And so decks that want to be greedy will have to have some way to deal with it. So Edelweiss, what is the card that you're scared of?
So also a hunter card. I'm scared of this because we didn't see much of it, but the times that I did, just on like a rush minion that got buffed through various ways a bunch, and then basically got to hit face still. Always a bigger Jormungandr. 1 mana spell in Hunter, give a minion +2 attack, and excess damage it deals to minions is dealt to the enemy face. We didn't even get to see this on Hollowhound because of the bug. It is going to be terrifying. Like there's going to be times where people have a buffed up Hollowhound and they just one-shot you with this. Certainly if they played Lorth Martheron or anything like that. I mentioned before the Hodir, right? It makes your next 3 minions 8/8s. So there's going to be all kinds of ways for Hollowhound to wreak havoc with this, but also, even outside of Hollowhound, Mukla, which is a 10/10 that'll become a 12/10. That has, right, like, a Hunter just has so many ways to utilize like rush and buffs to do a stupid amount of face damage with this. And I just really, really scared of its capabilities because that sort of mid-rangey Hound Hunter deck was already pretty solid. And I think even if the only card it got was always a bigger Jormungandr, it would be just like incredibly improved. Also tutorable with Trinket Tracker. But now they can also sort of pick and choose of, hey, do I want a secret package? Do I want an Observer of Myths package? Like, how do I want to play this out? And it'll just sort of get refined further and be all the more terrifying.
And that was the one way that you could shut that down was with taunts, right? Like if they had buffed up a King Crush and they were sitting on a King Crush and you just had, it didn't matter how small the taunt was because the King Crush cost 9 if you're playing it out of hand, right? If they had it in there, if they'd been bad at playing the deck and drew it, right? Then the only way that they were going to get to you is if they could get rid of the taunt which with 1 mana they couldn't really do easily. Now they could just use that 1 mana to play always a bigger Jormungandr and hit you in the face anyway. So it's pretty scary what it's going to enable that deck to do, even if that's like the only thing that changes in Hollowhound Hunter, is if they just take something out and put always a bigger Jormungandr in. If that's the only thing that it did, it would still improve the deck dramatically.
And even the secret package that Hunter got, we saw that a little bit, and it seemed pretty decent. I mean, the bow is 12 damage, and it can come down for not very much, and the Titan Forge Traps gives you a couple secrets. And because they didn't start in your deck, you can mess with your opponent more without having to run all of the different ones. So Hunter seems like it has a pretty good set. Obviously, we will have to see. So many secrets
too.
All right. Well, the card that I'm scared of is Jotun the Eternal, and also Runic Adornment kind of goes with this, but I'll focus on Jotun. So Jotun is the Keeper legendary, 5 mana, 4/5 battle cry for the rest of the game. Cast a copy of the first spell you draw each turn at enemies. So this does limit somewhat the kinds of spells that you can play in your deck, but if you're playing Relic Demon Hunter, you're pretty much fine. Like, oh, I got an extra Unleash Spell, I got an extra Relic, including a Relic of Dimensions. Maybe I overdrew with my Relic of Dimensions. Oh no. You know, unless it got all the rest of your relics in your deck, that's probably fine. And when we did see this go off, it seemed like it was pretty powerful. I mean, something like Momentum even, that gives your hero attack, so it's not targeted. It's not going to hit your own stuff, and it still does damage. And, you still get the spell. And you got a free copy of it for no mana, so even if it wasn't exactly when you wanted that spell to go off, that's fine. And then the Runic Adornment, we already talked about some, but that's the 2 mana, discover a spell that costs 3 or less and shuffle 2 copies into your deck that casts when drawn. It seemed pretty consistent that you would find something you wanted that to be. You would find a relic, you would find an Unleash spell. There's quite a few good hits off of that, so it could also be that Relic Demon Hunter is a deck that's already a lot more refined. People know how to play it, so they come into theory crafting, and it's, they've slot in pretty well, and so even though it's 10 new cards, it doesn't feel like a whole new deck. But I do think that, Relic Demon Hunter is already a strong deck. Not a meta tyrant, but a strong deck, and this really ups the power level on that. So I'm excited to play it. I'm going to play it, but I'm also not sure I want to face it.
Yeah. I mean, Relic Demon Hunter right now is basically like 20 cards that are the actual deck, and then like just 10 random jank. Like, Prosecutor Maltranix, you run Alkani, like you have all of these cards that like you run Z-Lag sometimes. Like cards that don't necessarily fit with what the deck wants to do, but it doesn't matter because you're just filling up the spots because the relic package is so strong. And like, if you just get an extra extinction, even if your opponent has an empty board, if you get an extra extinction off of Jotun, like who cares? You still pumped up your relics by 1, right? That's just like an extra relic proc for every spell that's remaining in your deck when you play that, which is what we were trying to do with things like with things like Fizzle, right? Where you're just trying to get more copies of it. So
this with Fizzle.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you could just get a full handful of everything that you had before. If you want to do that, I don't even know if you run Fizzle with this or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure you do, but that's funny.
This deck has gotten so greedy that I wouldn't be surprised if you do. But you don't have to, and then you still get the benefit of what you were doing with Fizzle in the first place, especially like since we cut Steno, right? Then it's really just become all about the relics, and it's just opened up that much more room, and it turns out the relic package is just fine with what it has even without the Steno burst.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks pretty terrifying. And I don't know if you still run School Teacher, but if you do, you can, if you miss on a relic, you potentially can hit Runic Adornment and then get the Runic Adornment to sort of re-roll and, discover one of the relics. So
yeah.
That was all, we were already running every type of Discover that could fit into that deck just for more relics. So, all right. Well, the picks of cards you're scared of from the last set for Wicked Good was Halvaria Darkraven,
Justified.
which I feel, yeah, it took a sec to really figure out, but it's Outcast Demon Hunter is a good deck. And for Edelweiss, it was Symphony of Sins, which I have seen win games. For sure, it's a fun card.
Perhaps not one to be scared of, but
perhaps not. I mean, to be fair, it seems scary when you read the card. I definitely think the card was hyped more than it seemed like it would be. I would have been in agreement with you on that.
I think if Warlock was in a better spot, it might have been better. It might still have its time to shine with all the things that Warlock is getting. I think Warlock.
Yeah, it might just be that it didn't have the shell. Yeah, we were running it in our control Warlock, and it was fine.
Yeah.
We managed to hit the one we wanted, at least, and so I think we used it that actually stabilized us, and then we won that game, and we go, how did we win that game? And it actually was the clear from Symphony of Sins.
Because we needed the 6 damage to everything, and we were able to find it, so.
All right. Our next category is card you want to be good, but isn't. And I will start. My pick is False Disciple, even though if it's always Herald Village, then that's fine. I would be happy, but I don't think it's always Herald Village. There's just so many, looking at the priest. So this is the 2-mana Battle Cry, discover a priest legendary from the past. And when you look at the wild priest legendaries, there are not a lot of cards you want to hit. And there are some cards that you want to hit, like Mita is probably a pretty good hit for you. Herald Village can be a good hit if you get it like on the Amanthul, but you can't play it on the same turn. The Nameless one silences and turns into a copy, so if they have like a Titan or a Mimiron or something, then now it's yours. So there are some good hits, but there's also just a lot of really terrible cards, especially when you weren't playing around them in the you weren't planning to play them in the first place. I'm not necessarily sad. I guess I said card you want to be good, but isn't. On the one hand, I think this card is really fun, and I would love to play it. On the other hand, I'm not sad that it isn't really good, because that would just be infuriating if like the entire pool was good and you didn't know what you were playing around, and you were just constantly, or if it was just really consistent. But I am sad that the pool is not like, there's not more just sort of like, yeah, that's a decent hit. There's just so many low rolls in that pool.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, one of the reasons that it was always Herald Village is because the other two choices were awful. I think one of them was Selena Bloodfeather, and I don't even remember what the other one was because I completely ignored it as soon as we saw it come up because it was that bad.
It was the one that starts with, hold on. It's like starts with a B, and it's from a set that I didn't actually play. And yeah, we looked, it was like 7 mana. Hold on, I'm trying to find it.
It wasn't Cahoon the Blood God, but it was up there in craptacularness.
It was up there in that level. It was Bwansamdi the Dead.
Oh yeah.
Draw one cost minions from your deck until your hand is full.
Yeah, great. That's exactly what I want to do. I mean, I guess in the Stars Align deck that might have been okay. But, I
mean, our Arcane Automaton or Astral Automaton deck, it draws you your Astral Automatons, which you don't even necessarily want to do because then your creation protocols can't hit them.
Yeah, it worked out with what we got from it in that one game, but yeah, it felt like I'm sure some people will run it. If you're doing Stars Align, then fine. Then you get a 2-drop that you can play early. You get another thing that you can Stars Align. That's probably going to be more expensive later on. That'll be a bomb or whatever. But yeah, it's not great. There are a lot of bad priest legendaries, and you're going to be lucky if you get one that's playable. We lucked into the Herald Village, and even that was kind of awkward. So
yeah, it's 6 mana. You can't really fit it in with stuff. All right. Well, Edelweiss, what is the card, or in this case, package, you want to be good but isn't?
It's Plagues. Even when you get Helia online early, I don't know if maybe some of it was prevalence of like Renathal decks in parts of the theory crafting or what, but just the fact that one of the things you would want to do this against is Priest, but Priest also has the solution in Svalna of just saying, okay, I just want to draw cards for the rest of the game. Like, it's not fast enough in terms of the damage. And I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if they're like so bad that you need to buff them to 3 damage eventually for them to be playable. But it just felt like they didn't look like they were drawn very frequently, even when it looked like a ton of them had been shuffled in. Helia, replaces them so that they stay there, but it's not like Hakar where they multiply every time one is drawn. So it seems like inevitability, but it never ended up being that. And because of the runes that you have to be running to like maximize shuffling in, it just didn't feel like you have the survivability to make it work. So maybe the solution is to go with like a more aggressive deck so that it's just like, well, you're happy for any damage that happens because you've got other death rattles going on, and so you're still doing board-based stuff. Maybe that's it. But okay, I'm just going to survive until my plagues kill you, like that isn't happening.
Yeah. Yeah, like when we were playing it, it felt like we were doing like we were playing it as designed, right? Like we were getting Helia on curve, we were getting the other things to happen, and it was just kind of like, well, yeah, they drew the stuff. Okay, great, we did it. Now what? And yeah, I mean, I think people were comparing this to Bomb Warrior, but forgetting that bombs from Bomb Warrior did 5 damage apiece, and 5 is a bigger number than 2 by at least 3. So it doesn't feel like it's doing enough, even though there are theoretically more of them and they're doing something else. Like the 2/2, like summon a 2/2 for your opponent, like, okay, whatever, right? Like the heal may not even be relevant if it's early enough in the game or if they just haven't hit you. And like the only one that seems like consistently going to be impacting them is the increase in card cost. And even that, like later in the game, if you're playing against an aggressive deck, they don't care. They're just top decking whatever they're getting, and they probably could just play anything anyway. So if they draw a bunch of them, then they'll care. But it does seem like it feels like it should feel a lot better than it does when you're actually playing with them.
Yeah, I don't know if there's some sort of shell that, either through the board is doing other damage, like you were saying, or whether some of the frost damage spells that we kind of abandoned after we realized that frost aggro DK was better, whether any of those could help get that last bit of chip damage, but it definitely seems like the plagues alone are not enough, at least with the runes that they have. I mean, the other thing with Bomb Warrior is that it had all of the control warrior tools to stay alive while they're waiting for you to draw all the bombs. And they don't need you to draw that many bombs. So it's definitely a different situation.
Yeah. Well, and also Bomb Warrior, a key part of it was a weapon that they buffed the attack and durability of. So Wrench Caliber would be hitting you for 3 damage, then 4 damage, then 5 damage, right? So you were getting these weapon swings to your face, whereas the Plague weapon is 3 damage, right? Like it's very cheap, efficient to play, and it shuffles 1 plague in like Wrench Caliber, except, as you say, the bombs were a whole lot more damage than the plagues are. So it isn't really made up for just by the fact that it's cheap and comes down early and shuffles them in quickly, because just the damage across the board is so much lower.
I mean, maybe you end up building like an Unholy DK, like a triple rune Unholy DK. You cut the frost cards and just put these in to try to get the 2/2s out every so often. Like, it's probably not good enough, but I'm trying to, or maybe they have to buff the damage to 3 to make it feel like something, because it just doesn't feel like it does enough. And you have to put a lot of cards into your deck to make this happen, right? To do things with it, like the destroy a plague, do 3 damage to the board. Like, I think we used it once and it felt okay, but it felt miserable to do it because the plagues already were just not doing enough as it was, and then you're getting rid of one, and you're getting rid of one that otherwise would be unending, right? So it just felt miserable to blow one up in your opponent's deck to do 3 damage to the board, and the rest of it is just like, okay, well, we can maximize this, but I don't really want to. So after playing it, it just felt like, okay, well, this is great, but we're not really getting anywhere.
Yeah, we'll see, but I think that definitely also what I've been seeing from people around the internet was that most people were not particularly impressed by them during theory crafting, at least. So Wicked Good, why don't you tell us about the card you want to be good but isn't?
Yeah, so Imprison Horror, which is the 9 mana 5/5 for Warlock, costs 1 less for each damage you've taken on your turns this game. What we realized when we tried to play with this card is that you run Fellstring Harp in the deck that you're playing this, and that kind of gets in the way of you getting the Imprison Horror down quickly. So, like, when you're playing Fellstring Harp on 2, then you're just, like, not taking damage on your turns for the first couple of turns. And then by the time that you do actually start taking damage on your turns, which is presumably when you have healing to make up for it, like, it doesn't matter. It's a 5/5. Like, who cares, right? Like, if you're going to get this down on like 2 or 3, you're going to take a whole lot of damage. Like, if you think about like Quest Warlock, right, from Stormwind, and you're going to take like a whole bunch of damage to be able to proc that quest and then play this, it would be great. That's not what we're doing in Warlock. We're playing the Fellstring Harp, and then we looked at it, and it was constantly clogging up our hand. And it's like, well, what are we doing? Why is this card in our deck? And we eventually swapped it out because it was just like not doing anything for us. I guess the best case scenario is if you have to discard the most expensive card in your hand to do that much damage to the board, then you got to discount this and do 9 to the board. Like, maybe that's the best case. But like, if your best case scenario is that you're not playing it, you're discarding it, like, maybe that's not a card that should be in your deck.
Yeah, we were not impressed with it. And so perhaps we'll be proven wrong, but that was definitely our experience. All right, so the cards from last set that you picked as card you want to be good but isn't. Eloise, you picked Fizzle, Photographer Fizzle. And Wicked Good, you picked Black Rock and Roll, which may yet have its time to shine.
Yeah, I might get proven wrong now, but at least for the last set, I was right on that one. So,
yeah, so I was kind of in between, right? It probably didn't need to be played in as many decks as people were running it for a while, but it has its home in a few.
But it's a flashy card.
It is a flashy card.
Thank you for getting that. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I got it.
There is still at least one pun in this show, even though we don't have hat.
Yeah.
All right. So our next category is card you think is over or underrated, and it looks like we all picked cards that we think are underrated. So Wicked Good, what was your choice?
So Lab Constructor is a card that took me a little bit by surprise when we were playing against it, which is the 4 mana 3/2 mech in Rogue. At the end of your turn, summon a copy of this, Forge Game Magnetic. The thing that it doesn't say is that procs again on the following turn. So if you don't clear these, all of a sudden there are 4 of them. And if you can't clear like the minions immediately, then you just never get rid of them ever, and then you die. And generally these have more things being magnetized onto them, and they just get bigger and they just keep multiplying and just never go away. It's slowish because you have to forge it, so you're really paying 6 mana for this effect total. But by the point of the game where you're doing this, it kind of doesn't matter. You've already kind of gotten something on board, and then you just get one more of them and you say what's up. And if your opponent can't clear it, then they never get rid of your board for the rest of the game. I don't know if it's going to play out like this in reality, or this was just a theory crafting thing because we were not prepared for Mech Rogue, clearly. when we were playing against it. And we were also playing like the greediest possible decks when we were playing against Mecro too. It just happened to work out that way. But it just surprised me at like, this demands removal for 2 things on board immediately, and if you fail, you die.
I mean, and I don't know that you have to forge it necessarily, because you can magnetize something onto this instead of this onto
Right.
something else. It's not as
Yeah.
ideal, because then you can't essentially go face with it. But, you know, you just play this for 4, you put a stealth spark bot on it, and then
Yeah, the number
unless
of
they've got
stealths.
some big
Oh.
AoE,
Yeah, the number of stealths that are available to Rogue that can magnetize onto things is also spooky in conjunction with this, because it just makes it that much harder to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine there's times where like you forge this on 2, you play the spider bot on 3. It has stealth for 1 turn, so your opponent doesn't remove it. Then you magnetic lab reconstructor onto it and go face for 6 and have 2 6/6s that, if they don't get cleared, are just going to keep making them. And the longer the stuff doesn't get cleared, more opportunities for you to magnetize other stuff, right? Just to make it even bigger and harder to clear, etc. Yeah, it can do some serious work. And then if you haven't landed that early curve, well, then on turn 7, you can just play it unforged, like you say, and magnetize the spider bot to it. So it's gonna do some silly things, to the point that I was kind of wondering, like, maybe I should include this in my miracle deck that, you know, just runs a very small mech package, because it seems kind of like a house all on its own.
Yeah, I mean, you run Mimiron, you put that on Mimiron, like, then you just have gadgets for days. And like, it almost reminds me of, remember like that week when Trog would just summon a copy of itself and not a fresh 1/2? And Paladin would just throw stuff onto it and just keep making it bigger and make it multiply. Like, that's what this feels like. And I don't want to go back to those days. Those days were not good. They were not fun for
Frog
me.
with the doggy biscuit. And then it would destroy all your stuff, take no damage. You could never get onto the board. I was playing all these board-based decks at the time, and it was just like, no.
Yeah.
Could not do anything.
Or like Blessing of Authority.
Yeah.
Like that was the kind, I mean, that was a little slower, but that was the kind of thing we were up against. I don't want to go back to those days. I don't want to go there. So I'm hoping that this is not as good as I think it is after theory crafting, but I was very taken by surprise by this card.
All right. Well, Edelweiss, what was your pick for card that is underrated?
So my underrated pick is Steam Guardian, which is the warrior card, 3 mana, 3/3, draw a spell. If it's a fire spell, reduce its cost by 1. And now I say this is underrated because I think people look at it and they're like, okay, yeah, sure, decent card. I mean, but you want to play Rifts, right? And, you know, not all the Rifts are fire spells. It's like fine. And then we saw John Bray very early in the theory crafting stream, who realized, oh, hey, you know, it's a fire spell, Black Rock and Roll. What if we made a deck where that was the only spell? So he created just a full-on, you know, minion deck with Magatha and, you know, some of the greediest stuff, some early game minions, because, you know, you still need to survive. And you basically just can consistently play Black Rock and Roll on 4 or 5, because you just always keep either it or a Steam Guardian in the mulligan. You basically have 3 shots at getting your Black Rock and Roll, and you just play it as soon as possible and then get these massive swings. We got, you know, another good warrior card in the set, Minotaur, that is a 6 mana 5/5 rush. When it attacks, it deals, or when it, you get armor equal to the damage it deals.
Yeah.
And of course, with Black Rock and Roll, it gets +6/+6, so that's 11 armor. And there's just, you know, so many things that benefit so efficiently from Black Rock and Roll. You can still run weapons as sort of your early clear tools, you know, Tuning Fork. You still got the Pirate that gives you a 3/2 weapon, so it's not like you have no defense against early stuff. It just so consistently gets to play Black Rock and Roll, have those, you know, 17 attack trench stalkers. It was scary, the amount of stats being played. We were watching mages just like alibying and playing blizzards and just buying time and buying time and buying time until eventually it was just like, oh, defenses are down. Okay, you're dead now because I have like 50 power in play.
We actually did play, we saw this and then said, oh, we have to change our control warrior to have only one spell.
Yeah.
So we went in, changed it, made it way too greedy, went back, made it a little bit less greedy. Quite a bit less greedy, actually. And it was quite effective having Black Rock and Roll, especially on 4.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up, we had a Finley ready for right after, and we didn't even need it because we kept top decking the perfect card for the turn. Whenever we felt like we needed something. And we didn't even need Odin in that particular game. And I'm wondering whether this is not, we ran Odin. I feel like you probably still run Odin.
Mm-hmm.
But the deck that really goes all in on Odin and armor is probably not the same deck as this one. Both of them seem promising. The only thing that I worry about with this is what if you do if there's a counter spell on 3? You're just very sad.
Cry.
Yeah. I mean, or you coin,
So,
hopefully, yeah. But yeah, otherwise you just cry. Yeah. But
yeah, I mean, do we play Vizier just for counter spell?
Yeah.
No undead.
There
Vizier.
were. I'm trying to think of what Allura did, like the Allura decks, because the Allura had like wand makers, I think, for that reason, just to have like 1-cost spells to be able to get through a counter spell.
Well, in that case, you needed something for the spell. Not spellcraft. Was it spellcraft?
Spellburst. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you needed something. You need
it,
something
right?
to trigger it. Yeah. But I mean, we did run like Minotaur, and we ran Tidal Revenant in that deck, so we had some things that would be able to proc Odin, but we never needed Odin. And in the games where we did need Odin, we couldn't get it down because we were just under too much pressure. So.
Yeah, there was a game where we would have been able to kill them very easily if we had gotten Odin down, but we just never had 8 mana to spend on Odin because we didn't have the survivability tools to have that turn of breathing room in order to get Odin down. So that is a consideration with that card. But I am really excited for that card. I do think that it's a win condition that's really impressive while rewarding what Control Warrior already wants to do with gaining a lot of armor. And it makes some of the armor cards that we've gotten leading up to this set more rewarding and make more sense.
Yeah.
So the card that I picked for underrated is also a warrior card, and that is the Warrior Titan Khazgaroth. This is 6 mana 4/4. After it uses an ability, gain immune this turn and attack a random enemy minion. And it can either give itself and you 5 attack, or itself 5 health and you 5 armor, which if you have Odin up, of course, is also 5 attack. Or it can gain +2/+2 and draw a weapon. And there are, that 4 mana 3/3 weapon after your hero attacks and kills a minion, gain 4 armor. It's pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that you're using that as your first ability very often, but it's pretty solid. And I think when this Titan came out, people were a little underwhelmed. We hadn't seen the rest of the Warrior set yet. And we were like, well, this isn't the Control Warrior card win condition that we were hoping for. What is this? But when we were playing it, we found that we could pretty often get it down to not that many minions for it to hit. I mean, there was one point where there was like a 1/2 and then the thing we needed to kill, and of course it hit the 1/2. It's unfortunate that you can't attack first with the attack that it gives you. But we were pretty consistently able to get it to clear things, and it was hard for them to kill. And we actually, at least once, got it to actually be able to attack regularly because they just couldn't get rid of it. And then at that point, it was an 11/11. So if it does last that long, it then becomes a threat on the board. So, it's not the flashy card, but it does help you control the board. The attack can either go face or go into another minion that it didn't kill. The armor is more relevant with Odin. So I don't think it's one of the flashier Titans, but I do think that it'll prove to be a solid card that gets included in Black Rock and Roll Warrior or Odin Warrior or whatever we end up with. Whether that's the same deck or not. I mean, they probably both still run those cards, but which one you're trying to maximize, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think people missed. I'm just assuming. I don't know, but I'm thinking that people missed either the fact that you could just put the 5 attack on that, or the fact that it was permanent, right? That like the first time that it's going to attack something, it's going to do 9 and not 4. I think that's something that people missed when they just read the front of the card and they didn't read the abilities, right? Because when you look at it, it's like, oh, it's just going to do 4 damage to a minion. Who cares, right? Who cares if it's immune? When it's doing 9, anything it's going to attack into is going to die almost always. And then you also have the 5 attack or the 5 armor or whatever to do whatever you're going to do with it. But it was pretty consistently a pretty good removal, and it was not easy to get rid of. You could go with the armor first if you only want to do the 4 damage if you only need to, and then you have a 4/9 and good luck. Like 9 is a lot to deal with, but also just like a 9/4 kill a thing, give you 5 attack to be able to kill another thing. You need to be able to deal with the Khazgrath after that, and it's hard to do that.
I think a lot of people looked at this and then looked at the other Titans and they were like, well, but these other Titans are win conditions.
Right.
And this one's not fancy because it is first and foremost a like control the board tool, right? So then you immediately think, well, what if the opponent doesn't have a board? Then it's just kind of useless. You don't get any value out of those attacks from using the abilities because there's nothing to hit. And it just ended up being a lot more of a board-based meta than I think we're used to with 5 set. And so this kind of always got pretty solid value because there were always things to hit into, and because of the immune while attacking, it sticks around and is just like hard to actually play minions into.
All right, well, the picks from last set for over or underrated, Wickagood, you said that Rhythm and Roots was overrated, and I think I had to sort of look up what that card does. So I think
guess
you
I
were
was
right on that one. And Edelweiss, you said Cover Artist was underrated, which it may still have its time to shine. I didn't see that many cover artists in Theory Crafting, but I know people have been doing a lot of speculating about Cover Artist and Titans.
I mean, I was surprised not to see more of it. I think probably because people were focused on fitting the 10 cards in for the Theory Crafting stream. But if Titans are really just all over the place in terms of being in decks, I feel like Cover Artist has got to see a ton of play in anything slower.
Yeah, people forget that you can target your opponent's Titan, or
that's like the main use case.
Yeah.
Because so many Titans have a removal ability. So you just copy the opponent's Titan to kill it.
But Edel, the only one that I care about copying, I could just make copies of in my own deck. I don't need to run Cover
Get
Artist.
out of here. Leave.
Well, we're about to get here. So our last category is card you don't understand. And my card is a card that I had already forgotten about until I was looking through the list for cards that I don't understand. And that is Disguised Kathir, 5 mana, 3/3. Each turn this is in your hand, transform into a random card in your opponent's deck. So the only class that could possibly play this is Priest, right? You're doing like a Thief Priest with if you play something they have, you take it, but it's not even in their hand, it's in their deck, and it's random, and it's still gonna, it just seems, I guess it's not costing 5 mana, it's costing whatever it actually costs.
Yeah,
that actually does make it more sense. Yeah. But actually, I'm realizing this. I was thinking, it's still costing 5 mana, and that makes no sense at all. But it's not costing 5 mana, it's costing whatever it is. So in that way, it's kind of like a Mind Eater that you can see what you're getting out of the box before you play it. So maybe I understand that a little bit more. But certainly not a card that I saw. But yeah, we do play The 1/2 that adds a card from your opponent's deck to your hand, and we play the Mind Eater that has the Death Rattle because we just need cards that are a win condition because we don't have one except for your win condition that we play faster than you do. I don't know why I'm saying we when I really mean Wicked Good.
So, I mean, the card that we've had this card before. It's called Chameleos, right?
Yes, and that did not see play. I don't think
it saw zero play.
Yeah,
people were very excited, and it was going to give people information, and it was going to be this great card. You could be able to play this card for your opponent's deck. It was awful, and the reason that it was awful, it is mainly because it throws off your game plan, right? Because you have to play the card on the turn that it turns into something that you want, which may not be what you actually need to do that turn. So it kind of, if you're not really iron-willed, it will cause you to go off your game plan to play this card because you need to get value out of this and you don't know when your next opportunity is going to be. And that was when Chameleos was looking at just the cards in your opponent's hand, which was a smaller set of cards. Now this is everything that's in their deck, which is a larger set of cards, so it's even more likely that you're going to go for a while without being able to get something to play. I mean, it's somewhere between Chameleos and Shifter Xeris in terms of like the size of the pool, but nobody played either of those cards. So I don't, there's maybe some sort of an argument for like a Harvester of Envy type of thing, where if you want to rip something out of their deck, but you're really probably overthinking this. If you're going that far into the weeds, you're probably not going to win very many games because you're too busy worrying about what your opponent's going to do.
Well, and that forces you to play the Harvester of Envy again on a turn you may not want to play the Harvester of Envy. Right. But that's a great point, because usually what you do as a control priest is you get a bunch of cards out of their deck and then you just sit on it until you're ready.
Yeah.
And you have a whole handful of that.
Right? Like that's the difference between that and Mind Eater. Like, if you get, I don't know, the 4/6 that makes Earthens, for example, that nobody would ever get that, right? If you get that in your hand, you have that in your hand for the rest of the game. You can play it whenever you want. This is only good for that turn, and then it changes into something else, and it may not be anything that you want to play then. So it has to line up with what it decides to become on the turn that you actually want to play it, and that's just like good luck.
I don't know what you're talking about, Wicked. Chameleos was great. It saved you like a minute and a half to 2 minutes on every game, because you would see what your opponent was going to kill you with on their next turn at the start of your turn. So you could just concede that much earlier.
Because you put a card that didn't do anything into your deck to start with.
Yeah, and then you saw, oh, they have the fireball. Okay, it's like when you're playing Magic and they're just like, here, let me reveal this lightning bolt in my hand, and you don't have to think about your turn.
All right, well, on that note, Eloise, we kind of teased this a little bit. What is your card that you don't understand?
So I think Wicked should actually go first, and we'll end on this.
Okay, we'll end on this. That's a good idea. All right,
good.
Wicked. What is the card you don't understand?
Well, after trying to play it for about an hour, it's Astral Automaton. Like, I don't understand why what this card is supposed to do. Because we tried playing it in a deck that was optimized for it, right? Like, we tried playing it with Construct Protocol and with Power Word Synchronize and everything else we could think of to get copies of it. And we even had Master Revelers in the deck at one point because I was just completely in a fugue state. And like,
that was not it.
It was definitely not it. And like, even when we got it to work, right? Like, we only got like a handful of them. And then if you put too many minions in to get you more copies of them, like we could run like Celestial Projectionist, which gives you a temporary copy of a minion, right? Like, we could do that, but then that's more minions that you're putting into your deck that Construct Protocol will hit that aren't Astral Automatons. So then it's like, well, what? And then we finally get to do it, and we've got these mechs that are on the board that are just like vanilla that don't do anything, and then our opponent just hits us in the face and kills us. So like, we can't really go all in on it because the cards just have anti-synergy with each other. If you're just like throwing it into a deck, what's the point if you're only getting like 2 or 3 of them? Right? Then it's like, okay, well, I got a 1 mana 3/3. Hooray, we did it. Like, why? So I don't know what we're supposed to do with Astral Automaton, because it clearly seems like it's something you have to build around some way. Because if you don't, then it's just, who cares? And if you do that, then you just die because you have all these cards in your deck that are meant to copy the thing, and then you don't draw it because you're busy finding all the other things that you put in your deck to copy it. But other than that, it's great.
And when this card was revealed, I immediately was like, this is interesting. I'm going to build this deck. And then you pretty quickly are like, there are ways to copy things, but there's not a lot of very like mana efficient ways to copy things. So by the time you're getting these online, yeah, the automaton itself only costs 1 mana, but the thing you used to copy it was probably expensive. So you're still paying for that vanilla 5/5 or whatever you've gotten onto the board, and it doesn't add up all that fast. Yeah. So maybe there is a way, but I don't think so.
I'm not smart enough to figure it out, I don't think. And it just, like if you think about Construct Protocol, right? Like if you're forging it, that's 4 mana to get 2 automatons sometimes when you're lucky. Right? It's like, so we're paying 4 mana, then we still have to play the cards. And so we've now paid 6 mana for a 2/2 and a 3/3. I mean, hopefully they're bigger than that, but I mean, and then if you draw them, then the construct protocols don't work anymore, right? Because they're not in your deck anymore. So now you have to have Finley to get them back into your deck so that you can make the copies. Yeah.
Sure sounds like Pogo Hopper.
Somebody will figure it out.
There will be a tavern brawl that it breaks.
Or Rogue will copy it from Priest with Thief Rogue cards and then make it work. I'm sure that's going to be how it's going to work. All right.
All right.
I've said my.
We ready?
I don't know, but I guess we're going to have to be.
All right.
I took a different approach to this question, a card I didn't understand. And I said Amanthul, because this is hands down the most powerful Titan in the set, and I don't think it's close. And it encourages more Control Priest. I think I understand Astral Automaton because Amanthul exists, because Priest could have gotten only Amanthul in this expansion, and it would have gotten better. Yes, I suppose some of the time it will speed up Control Priest games because you'll get stuff that actually like wins, but just the ability to play Power Chord Synchronize or Creation Protocol, and like this is what you Creation Protocol, right? You Creation Protocol, Amanthul, and then you've got 3 of them. And unless your opponent is also playing Priest and throws out a Whirlpool, that's just like so much stuff. The fact that you poof 2 minions targeted, you get to choose the minions that you are poofing and not triggering their death rattles or anything else for. It's just, if you do the like card evaluation thing of when it's good, I suppose it's still a 7-cost card, so like it comes down later. But if you're behind, fantastic. You remove 2 things, no questions asked. If you are like ahead, great. You can make a 6/6 taunt lifesteal, or I guess it's not 6/6, but a 6-drop taunt lifesteal to protect you, and or go on the offensive, right? So you've got now a 3/10 that must be removed, and a 6-drop with taunt lifesteal, and you got to discover a legendary. Like the discover a legendary from any class is just salt in the wound. It has some of the best abilities of any of the Titans, and then and we'll just give them value, I guess, because that's Priest's thing, is just infinite value. On top of the fact that you're getting extra copies of Amanthul. And then, yeah, I suppose if your opponent has something in play that you like, you just summon a copy of it on your side. We won't let you summon a copy of a Titan. I mean, that's too good. Besides, you already exiled their Titan with the first ability. So, yeah, you can't copy a Titan with the copy ability, but, you can have something else and buff it. It's just so staggeringly powerful while also giving you card advantage and being able to discover the legendary menu you get. Like it's pretty hard to miss. I feel like you're usually gonna find something useful. I'm sure there'll be times where you're offered like 3 bad ones, but typically the deck that runs Amanthul is going to get to play it multiple times, and it's going to be just incredible every single time.
It has 10 health.
Yeah, and it's to the point where I really think you can make a control priest deck where like the only minions are Svalna, Amanthul, and Raden, and like you've just everything else is removal, and you still have infinite value. It's potentially unbearable if we don't have like if shaman and mage are not strong enough in their from hand damage to actually kill it. I think we're in serious trouble.
You forgot Blackwater Behemoth, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, not Raden.
Which,
Blackwater Behemoth.
if we
Well,
compare
both.
what
You
you're
do
getting for
both.
7 mana,
Yeah,
You
we
do both, 'cause
always
you'll
play
draw one.
Behemoth.
Yeah.
you could put Behemoth back to 8. Maybe that's the trade-off. Put it back to 8.
But we always play Behemoth at 7, and this is so much more. It doesn't heal you instantly the way that Behemoth does, but everything else is so much more.
It's okay. You play this. You play Behemoth on 7, then you play this and copy the Behemoth. It made me so happy. I'm so happy thinking about Amanthul, and just like I'm gonna sleep so well tonight. It's gonna be delightful.
Only
Come to the
suffering.
dark side, Edel. We have cookies.
No, thank you.
All right,
World 8 was actually theory crafting the just a couple of minions deck, control priest deck in Discord today. Yeah, and it looked pretty much like what you were describing. I think we might have thrown ETC in there just to have like Steam Cleaner or whatever, just to be able to, not die to some of those decks, but
Sure.
yeah. It'll be
all
fun.
right, well, the cards from last set that you said you did not understand, for Edelweiss, it was the entire warrior class. Which, remember, the rifts were not buffed yet.
It was questionable at the time.
Wasn't Bridge Rift like 6 at the time?
It was.
Everything was worse, yeah.
Everything
All
was like
3 of
1
them.
mana more. Yeah, like they needed to be. I mean, they're still fine. I mean, they're good enough to be an Enraged Warrior, but yeah, they were unplayable at those costs.
And Wicked Good, you picked Synthesize, which we now have some more elementals for Mage, but definitely I don't know that we play it now, and certainly it didn't make much sense in Festival.
Does a wider pool make that card better? I'm not even sure that makes that card better. It might make it worse.
No, I don't know if there's some... It would have to be an elemental mage, and I don't know that we have that. But they do seem to be slowly trickling cards for elemental mage, so maybe they know something we don't. Well, they certainly know something we don't, but maybe there's something in the pipe. All right. Well, we should probably wrap up our show. It's such a busy show this time, but all really exciting things to be talking about. And I'm really looking forward to the expansion. I actually got confused. Grumpy Monk in the Discord asked me like who had won the previous listener series, and I got confused because I thought that we were in Titans already. And I was like, wait, so I won it 2 times ago, so that was March of the Lich King, right? No. It was Nathria. Because the like 3rd expansion ago was Nathria, not March of the Lich King. And yeah, it was see, I'm still messing it up now because the theory crafting just messed up my brain.
Time is weird.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap up.
Yeah.
Yeah. My brain is ceasing to function after the theory casting last night, and then this is our longest show in a while. Can't help when you get an interview, but really glad.
And then we got you
all
all riled up by talking about Amenthal. So.
Yeah, exactly. But we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at coinconcede.com, where you can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. And write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede, as well as like, share, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. If you'd like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Doge Decay, Kresh, Cap, Beef Squatch, David P, Walu, Jeremy T, Bottle Caps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Forgiven One, and Enraged Chicken. We had a couple of subs during the show, so thank you to JDP Range and the Grand Arcana. Coin Concedes.
All right, well, I will coin concede to Cora and Galen for a really incredible interview and for giving their time to us to do that interview, and could tell they had really thought also about their answers. And also to Ridiculous Hat and Blizzard in general for the opportunity to do that interview and the opportunity to do theory crafting as well. Really happy to have both of those. And also coin concede to Edelweiss for accidentally spectating our degenerate game.
Wicked.
Well, I'm gonna coin concede to Storm Rage because I'm so sorry. Like, between that and he was also on the receiving end of the the 6-mana Insatiable Devourer, so he just like queued into us and then hated life, I'm sure. But and I'm also going to coin concede to the guy who was running the motel that we stayed in Maine this weekend, because we went up to drop one of the younger ones off at camp, and there's like, we stay in this little like seaside town that's like half an hour away from the camp, and it's not, there are no like real, you know, like commercial hotels. It's all like beds and breakfasts and like motels and stuff like that. So Maureen found this place for us to stay last year, and we stayed there again. So it's like one of these places where like the office is separate, and then they walk you over to your room, which is like in a separate building. And we get there, and we've driven for like 4.5 hours, and we go in there, and he says, "Oh, I had you down for tomorrow." And it's like the height of summer, right? Like it's like a, you know, a big touristy place up there. There's not a lot of vacancies, and I'm just looking at her like, "Are you kidding me? Like, what is happening?" He's like, "Oh no, I'm just kidding." And it's like, what are you doing, sir? This is a neurodivergent family. You cannot do this. And then he regaled us with dad jokes for like 15 minutes, like basically that we
Oof.
were, I was just like sitting there with like daggers in my eyes, like, please let me go to my room so I can pass out. And he's just like the word, like not hat level puns, by the way, like, you know, things that you would find in like a 3rd grade like joke book, and just like a whole like, and I kept thinking it was going to be the end of it. It just kept going. I'm like, okay,
Oof.
thank you, sir. Please let us go to our room now. I didn't realize that this was part of the payment. so coin concede to him. I'm glad that he's living his best life up there. So,
Well, I am going to coin concede to two of you for sticking out in a long show, and then also to Lorinda, who handled all the codes and chat stuff from the Theory Cast stream. We kind of had a pretty good delegation of duties going on there. I maybe could have brushed up a little more on my OBS skills. I had a few hiccups, but worked out okay in the end.
all right. Well, we will talk to you again next week once the set is out. Oh, we should mention we are doing our normal pack opening streams on opening day. Edel, you're starting right at 1, right? When the is that your plan? When the set comes out, I will be live with Maureen to do our pack openings at around 6:30 Eastern. And I guess I'm not going to put you on the spot. I know you're not really set up for streaming yet, but
I am not fully set up yet, even though I know this is like the best timing to be set up. I am not, but I will be stopping in if I can to your streams. And if I do get something set up, I will put it on Twitter. I will put it in the Discord. So, but definitely check out the pack opening streams of my co-hosts.
Yeah, and I guess we'll find out if Hat is allowed to do a stream like he does, and maybe I'll still be able to raid into him. I guess we'll find out. But until then, keep calm and have good luck with your pack openings. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede. I still expect to hear the music after the third coin concede.
I think I did that once and people yelled at me. So I didn't do it again.
I hear it in my head.
Okay. Because it's long too.
Right.
Like you don't realize how long it is when you're sitting there.
It is quite long.
Yeah. Waiting.
It is quite long, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that Hat started playing it and then had it fade off or something, but I could be just completely wrong on that.
He might have. I don't know.
But
All right. Well, we should find somebody to raid.
I suppose.
We've got Ant streaming, Warshack, Get Meowth, Ron Mexico.
Oh, it's almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
The interview.
Well, the interview should be easy at it. You just drop the audio in, right? So I'm gonna have the audio in the raw.
But,
so yeah.
No, I just mean in terms of the interview being half an hour plus on top of what was already a long episode. It's just kind of unfortunate timing. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I'm up for whoever we want to raid. I don't know. I don't remember who we raided last time, so we raid on Mexico. I don't think we've raided him in a while.
Sure.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're gonna go raid around Mexico. Everybody, we'll see you on Tuesday for pack openings, and then we'll see you back here on Thursday. Have a great night, and be good to each other in 10 seconds because I didn't press the button yet. Because I forget always about that 10-second countdown. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great night.
Have a great night.